Chapter 351. The chilly wind in the 9th netherworld cave blew out as usual. Yu Qianqiu had been inside for half a month, but there was still no reaction. The group of people waiting outside the cave gradually felt their hearts grow cold. They all had a bad premonition, but they still stood guard outside, clinging to a trace of hope. Clang, clang. A faint sound came from inside the cave. The 10 ghost generals guarding the cave were the first to hear it, and they all turned around to look. Although the people on the opposite cliff were not as close as them and did not hear the sound, they were all attracted by the unusual behavior of the ghost generals. Could it be that Yu Qianqiu had returned? The same thought appeared in everyone's mind, and they all stared at the cave entrance. The ghost generals at the cave entrance did not see anyone coming out, but they saw some black stones rolling weakly to a place not far from the cave entrance and stopped. The wind at the entrance was probably not strong enough to blow the stones out of the cave. 2 ghost generals dashed in and picked up a few stones to take a look. They were instantly shocked. The 2 nodded and shot out of the cave, flying to the side of Yu Ji on the opposite cliff. "Madam, look, it's nether iron. Not far from the cave entrance, a lot of it has been blown out by the wind, and there are faint sword marks on it." A ghost general handed over the nether iron in his hand and said. Yu Ji took the nether iron, and her eyes lit up again. She ordered, "The 2 of you, quickly go and collect all the nether iron that can be collected at the cave entrance." The 2 generals obeyed, and in no time, they had gathered a large pile of nether iron on the cliff top. The group of people watched, and after Zhang Lingxian checked, he stood up and said to Yu Ji, "Madam, nether iron is not afraid of the chilly wind and the black wind blades, and ordinary magic tools are useless against it. Moreover, there are sword marks on every piece of nether iron, and it is obvious that someone used a sword to dig them out. I'm afraid that Mr. has an extremely powerful sword on him that can easily dig out nether iron. It is very likely that Mr. is digging out nether iron to defend against the black wind blades." His judgment was right. These nether iron were blown out by the wind when Yu Qianqiu first started digging the tunnel. "That's right." A relaxed smile appeared on Yu Ji's face as she said, "You are a disciple of the punishment enforcer, so it's not surprising that you have 1 or 2 extremely powerful treasures." Hearing this, everyone nodded their heads in agreement. If this was heard by Yu Qianqiu, he would only reply with, "Ah pooey. What *t treasure?" Zi frowned instead and said, "Madam, Yu Qianqiu went in with Senior Yan Ta, and Yan Ta's cultivation is much higher than Yu Qianqiu's." "Why are all of you so sure that these things were definitely made by Yu Qianqiu and not Senior Yan Ta?" Yu Ji glanced at the smiling crowd, then she looked at the 9 netherworld cave and said with a smile, "The 9 netherworld cave is the passageway from the human world to the netherworld, so it's not a place that ordinary people can go. The closest place with nether iron is also at the end of the passageway. Not to mention the deeper places, just that place alone, other than the Ghost King's final stage ghost cultivators, few human experts at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage can reach that place, let alone Yan Ta, who is only at the initial stage of the tribulation passing stage. Therefore, Yan Ta is already dead if he can't reach that place. Yu Qianqiu's cultivation is even lower, so it's even more impossible for him to reach that place." Zi confirmed her suspicions. Seeing that she still hadn't figured it out, Yu Ji patiently explained, "Logically, with Mr.'s cultivation, it would be difficult for him to stay at the entrance of the cave for a long time. Did you see the green flame on Mr.'s body before he entered the cave? That must be what Mr. relied on to enter the cave. Also, I don't know if you noticed, but before Yan Ta entered the cave, he didn't have anything on him. It's impossible for us to leave anything that could threaten Mr.'s safety on him, so the black iron that came out earlier couldn't have been brought in by Yan Ta, and it's even more impossible for a treasure to excavate the nether iron in front of us. Moreover, although Mr.'s cultivation isn't high, his magic power is profound. At least, I saw with my own eyes that he killed a demon king at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage with a raise of his hand. Mr. is only at the initial stage of the tribulation passing stage, so it's naturally not a problem for Mr. to deal with Yen Ta. The demon king that was killed by Ze was Yufengjiao, but it was obviously the first time that everyone heard about this, so they were all secretly shocked. Ze's expression changed, and she thought about what her master had told her before. When there was danger, he should run first, and that brat definitely had the ability to protect himself. Now, it seemed that what her master said was true. Yu Qianqiu could even kill a demon king at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage, so he indeed had the ability to protect himself. Once this thought was confirmed, and she let go at a crucial moment in the future, it made Yu Qianqiu not know whether to laugh or cry, and he almost called her great aunt. This was all in the future, and they would talk about Yu Qianqiu later on. Yu Qianqiu, who was in a critical situation, gradually fell into a state of unconsciousness, and finally fell softly to the ground. The blue fire on his body had already been completely absorbed into his body, and it was also fortunate that the black fiend had flowed in from the top of the cave, or else it would have been terrible. In a daze, Yu Qianqiu suddenly opened his eyes and woke up, and found that he was actually lying on the ground, so he hurriedly got up. Just as he was rejoicing that he was fine, he suddenly saw another person lying at his feet, and was shocked on the spot. He thought to himself, could it be that someone had also broken in, and had also fainted like me? When Yu Qianqiu bent down to see that person's appearance clearly, he instantly felt as if he was struck by lightning, and took a few steps back. If he did not see wrongly, that person looked exactly the same as him, and that person's attire and accessories, it was clearly him. Feeling bewildered, Yu Qianqiu squatted down, and wanted to turn that person over to examine him properly, in order to resolve the doubts in his heart. Who knew that when his hand touched that person, it actually passed through his body, and he did not know whether the person on the ground was an illusion, or he was an illusion. How could this be? Could it be? Could it be? He thought of a chilling possibility: he might have already died, or his soul had left his body. In great shock, he shook his head woodenly, and retreated. He could not accept this kind of result. Who knew that when he moved a little further away from the person lying on the ground, his whole body actually floated up lightly, and a strong suction force came from the place where the red light was shining at the end of the tunnel, and dragged him over. Don't. I haven't lived enough, I don't want to die. Yu Qianqiu struggled with all his might in the air, but it was useless. That mysterious force made him unable to resist. At this moment, the person lying on the ground suddenly emitted a burst of golden light, and immediately after, a brilliant silver light pillar shot out like a galaxy, directly enveloping Yu Qianqiu, who was struggling in the air, cutting off that mysterious force, and actually slowly pulling him back. The scenery in front of Yu Qianqiu's eyes changed, and he suddenly found himself in the vast and brilliant universe. In the vast universe, the galaxy was brilliant, and the stars formed a nebula, eternal, lonely, desolate, and beautiful, and he was floating in the endless universe. F***ck. Could it be that I am dreaming? Yu Qianqiu was stunned, and just as he was trying to figure out what was going on, his vision suddenly turned black, and he fainted again. After a long time, Yu Qianqiu, who was lying on the ground, opened his eyes again, and suddenly jumped up. He anxiously looked around, and did not see the person he saw in his dream on the ground. His hands touched all over his body, and he finally heaved a sigh of relief, patting his chest in relief, and said, "Good, good, I was wondering why I ran into the universe again. There are no sci-fi blockbusters to watch now. So it was a dream, I was almost scared to death." Chapter 352. But there was one thing that had aroused his suspicions. That bone-chilling cold had been carved into his bones. And the matter of him fainting just now was definitely not a dream. It was something very real. Strange, he didn't feel that cold anymore, just a little chilly. Something was fishy. As Yu Qianqiu was pondering, he saw that he was safe and sound even without the protection of the blue flames. He looked up at the black fiends floating above him and immediately understood. His gaze fell on the end of the red light and he carefully walked over. When he reached the cave entrance, he was immediately stunned by the scene before him. He was at the entrance of a cave on the cliff of a huge underground space. In front of him were endless raging flames that soared to the sky, black flames. Below was the molten red lava, which also dyed the black flames red. However, it was easy to tell that these flames were black in color. Massive black lotuses grew in the lava, and the raging flames were the result of the black lotuses. They were in the exact same form as the blue lotuses he had seen in Twilight Valley, but the blue lotuses were not as long as the black lotuses. In short, the entire scene was very grand and imposing. Yu Qianqiu had seen the blue flames bred by the blue lotuses, so he naturally understood what the black lotuses before him signified. It was clear that this black sea of flames was the netherworld flame Yu Ji had spoken of, the legendary netherworld ghost flame of the demon realm, and also one of the three true flames he desired, black flame. After so much trouble, he had finally arrived here. Yu Qianqiu was rather excited, but his joy didn't last for long. That bone-chilling cold from before stealthily crept over his body, and he couldn't help but shiver. It felt like even his blood was about to freeze. Damn! Was he going to faint again? What the hell was going on here? As he sensed that his consciousness was getting a little dizzy, Yu Qianqiu became bewildered. At this moment, the nascent soul sitting cross-legged in his dantian exploded with golden light, and the entire nascent soul transformed into a small golden man of sparkling light. A warmth flowed from his dantian to his entire body, instantly dispersing the cold. The golden light on the nascent soul also slowly faded. Yu Qianqiu was slightly startled, but he was immediately delighted. It seemed that the golden bead was working again. There was something strange about this place. It was not advisable to stay for long. Yu Qianqiu poked his head out of the cave and quickly looked around. Although the sea of fire in front of him was dyed red, the top of the fire was clearly black. Black smoke was rising from the top of the blazing fire, gathering above the huge underground space like a dark cloud. Perhaps it was because of the airflow produced by the wind behind them. A strand of the black clouds that had gathered above them was continuously sucked into the cave. He immediately understood that the so-called black fiend was the remaining smoke of the black fire, and it was precisely this remaining smoke that formed the most difficult obstacle to enter the 9th netherworld cave. Just the smoke alone was so powerful, so the black fire itself must be even more powerful. Yu Qianqiu licked his lips as he stared greedily at the sea of fire. He immediately noticed something strange. The black fire was also fire, and there was also the molten lava below. Logically speaking, he should have been able to feel the intense heat if he wasn't standing too far away, so why did he feel a little chilly instead? This was far too abnormal. He couldn't figure it out, so he decided to stop thinking about it. Seizing the time to gather the black fire element he needed was the best course of action. He immediately sat down cross-legged and began to circulate the starflame fire art. With his eyes closed, Yu Qianqiu immediately sensed the majestic amount of black fire element contained in this underground space. It was many times more abundant than the blue fire element in Twilight Valley, and it probably had something to do with the many black lotuses producing the black fire element. The abundance of fire element was exactly what Yu Qianqiu wanted. The starflame fire art began to circulate faster, and the little black spirits began to pour into his body through his pores and gather at his dantian. The moment they entered the dantian, one of the two beads revolving around the nascent soul, the red bead, suddenly exploded with a red light, immediately attracting the little black spirits. Although the red bead seemed small, it seemed to have a space within it, and it welcomed the guests with open arms. It was unknown just how much black fire element the red bead had absorbed, but once the red light faded, the black fire element stopped pouring in and began to disperse from the dantian to every cell in his body. When the cells that stored water and green fire element saw the arrival of a guest, they immediately compressed themselves to make room for the guest. After absorbing his fill of black fire element, Yu Qianqiu put away the starflame fire art. When he opened his eyes, two illusory black flames flickered in his pitch-black pupils. Together with the satisfied smile on his face, he exuded a sinister aura. The moment the black fire element entered his body, he immediately felt a connection with it, and he immediately understood why this place felt so cold. It turned out that this black fire was not like the blue fire, which had a high temperature. It was a type of ice fire, which was the opposite of the blue fire. The specific effect it had to be tested, but since it was ranked higher than the blue fire, its power must not be small. Yu Qianqiu stood up. At this moment, his body no longer felt that bone-chilling cold. He had already subdued the black fire, so why would he be afraid of the black fire's low temperature? His gaze shot towards the blazing flames, and he wondered if the legendary Door of the Nine Hell that led to the Netherworld would be behind the flames. He stretched out his palm, and a black flame emerged from the center of his palm. It was a black color that could take one's soul away. The fire turned rapidly, and quickly condensed into a black flying sword that floated out of the cave. Just as Yu Qianqiu was about to step on it and pass through the sea of netherworld fire, he seemed to see the three words, by Changchun, on the wall of the netherworld iron cave from the corner of his eyes. Actually, he had already stepped on the sword and flew out of the cave. He thought he was seeing things when he saw the three words from the corner of his eyes, but he still turned around and flew back. When he looked carefully at the entrance of the cave, he realized that there really were three words, by Changchun, on the wall, and there were more than just these three words. As the color of the words and the wall were the same, and he did not look carefully before, he naturally did not realize it. It was only when he stepped on the flying sword that he discovered it due to the lighting and the angle. The handwriting was bold and powerful, as if it was engraved with some kind of sharp weapon. It might even be a sword. Yu Qianqiu carefully looked at it, and it wrote, "Lonely and invincible in the human world, but I have no fate to ascend to the heavens. I have long heard that the netherworld is equal to the celestial world, and I wish to find a strong opponent. The sea of netherworld fire separates the two worlds, but my wishful thinking ends here." There was another sentence written especially conspicuously, by Changchun returns with hatred. This was obviously written by Changchun himself. Yu Qianqiu's eyebrows twitched as he read it. The meaning of the words was very easy to understand. The general meaning was, Bai Changchun is lonely and invincible in the human world. He wants to find an opponent in the celestial world, but he can't. He heard that the netherworld is equal to the celestial world, so he wants to find an opponent in the netherworld. Unfortunately, he can't cross the netherworld fire sea in front of him, so he returns unhappily. F***ck 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 F***ck. Yu Qianqiu said a few times in a row, and shook his head with a bitter smile. The old fellow is so strong that he's a little unreliable. He thinks that he has nothing better to do, and even thinks about the people from the celestial world and the netherworld. I was wondering why I heard from Yu that the old fellow came here before, so he wants to find a fight in the netherworld ghost world. He really has nothing better to do. I'm speechless. He shook his head helplessly, and just as he turned around, he paused and looked at the netherworld fire sea with an, could it be that this netherworld fire sea is so powerful that even with the old fellow's cultivation, he can't cross it? Then wouldn't I be even more powerful than the old fellow if I cross it? Damn it. It's not good to publicize such a flashy thing. Laozi has to leave some words here. Who knows, maybe some later generations will come here and know that there is a person like me, Yu Qianqiu. Without hesitation, the black flying sword made a series of noises on the cave wall, but it didn't leave any marks. Yu Qianqiu slapped his forehead. This netherworld metal could restrain the black demon wind blade, so it was normal that it could restrain the black fire. Looks like he still had to use the green fire. A finger ignited with a green glow. Yu Qianqiu pondered for a while, then waved his finger and slowly wrote a few lines of words on the cave wall. I heard that master came here before, so disciple also came to join in the fun. Since master can't cross here, disciple will give it a try. In the great sea, the new waves push the old, and each generation is stronger than the last. Finally, he also left a very conspicuous line of words, Yu Qianqiu has been here. These words were written behind by Changchun's words. After he finished writing, he carefully looked at it. Comparing the two, no matter if his words were neat or not, the structure made him feel ashamed. How could this have the momentum of each generation being stronger than the last, so he couldn't stand it anymore. Without saying anything else, he shamefully stepped onto the flying sword and charged into the netherworld fire sea, looking like he was seeking death. Chapter 353. Only when he was in the sea of fire did he realize that the lava below should still be at a normal high temperature, but it was suppressed by the ice and fire released by the Black Lotus. Yu Qianqiu was a little proud. Even Bai Changchun couldn't make it through, but he could do it with ease. He was born with talent. Just as he was feeling proud of himself, the front suddenly became empty. Only then did he realize that he had passed through a sea of fire that was nearly 1,000 meters wide. Yu Qianqiu slowly descended on his sword. Beneath his feet was a soft black pure land. His gaze fell on the mountain wall in front of him. The huge dark iron mountain wall stood straight in front of him. It was curved in shape, and carved with skulls of different sizes. There seemed to be adults and children's skulls. Against the fiery red light of the molten lava, the entire mountain wall seemed to be piled up with skulls. Standing in front of it, pairs of pitch-black eye sockets seemed to be looking at you, as if questioning you about something. It made you feel a palpitating aura of death. It was very thick, very heavy, and oppressive, making it difficult for you to breathe. There was a door in the center of the skull wall. It was more than 10 meters tall and 7 to 8 meters wide. All kinds of human heads were carved on it. They weren't skulls. There were old people, children, men, and women, with all kinds of expressions. Happiness, anger, sorrow, and happiness were vividly expressed. It gave people the feeling that once you entered the door, you would forget all the emotions in the world. Other than the human heads, there was also a beast head on each side of the door that looked like a sky-swallowing beast. There was a knocker hanging from the fangs of the beasts. There was a huge dark iron tablet in the weeds beside the door. There were words on the tablet, Dark Ghost Realm, knock on the double knocker. Once you enter, do not open the door for humans, demons, or you will never return. This was clearly a warning sign, telling people that ghosts could enter, but others should not enter, or else they would never come out. Yu Qianqiu looked at it and found it strange. It was fine if humans and demons did not enter, but why did demons come out? Was there a demon realm? It seemed like it was the same no matter how he looked. Yu Qianqiu did not think it was a big deal. In any case, he would not open the door and run in. He was not someone like Old Bai who had nothing better to do. Instead, it was the weeds under the nether steel that piqued his interest. The color of the grass was bright red, and it had 3 branches and 7 leaves, which coincided with the number of 3 souls and 7 spirits in the human body. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but laugh out loud. This grass was none other than the resurrection grass that he was looking for. How could he not be happy? As soon as he laughed, he immediately heard evil laughter coming from everywhere in this space, as if the laughter came from those skulls. Yu Qianqiu was shocked and quickly shut his mouth. The strange laughter also gradually stopped. So it was Hui Yin. He heaved a sigh of relief, but did not dare to laugh anymore. He walked over and plucked a stalk of resurrection grass. He examined it closely and sniffed it. Sure enough, it was colorless and odorless. Who would have thought that the moment his breath touched the resurrection grass in his hand would immediately turn into a cloud of black smoke and dissipate? Yu Qianqiu was stunned with his hand open. He recalled the records in the pill recipe jade archive. The resurrection grass was not a spiritual herb of the human world. It could not come into contact with human life, or it would immediately turn into smoke. He raised his hand and slapped his forehead, coming to a realization. He decided that he would seal it in ice and harvest it when he needed it. Hence, he took out a silver ball and stuffed it into a place that he thought was safe. After he felt that there wouldn't be any problems, he began to wander around to see if there was anything else that he needed. Alas, this place was very poor. It seemed that other than the black soil and nether steel on the ground, there was only the resurrection grass left. He was no longer interested in these things. It wasn't easy for him to come here, so he had to bring something back with him to commemorate his trip. Dig up a skull and bring it back. There was no point. As he was looking around, his gaze suddenly fell on the door that led to the netherworld. The door knockers in the mouths of the two heaven-devouring beasts were black and shiny, faintly emitting a black glow. They shouldn't be made from nether steel. Could they be some kind of treasure? Yu Qianzhou's eyes lit up. His interest was immediately piqued. The position of the door knocker was very high. It was about 4 to 5 meters tall. He mounted a flying sword and flew over. He touched the door knocker and carefully examined it. The door knocker was very big, just like the heaven and earth ring hanging on Naja's neck. Moreover, judging from the material, it was obviously different from the other materials on the door. It was definitely not nether steel. He tried to pull it out, but unfortunately, the beast's head was obviously not made from ordinary materials. It was impossible to remove the door knocker with brute force. Without another word, Yu Qianzhou released his black flame and compressed it into a cutting shape. Unfortunately, there was no reaction after sawing for a long time. Since his black flame didn't work, he released his blue flame. Sure enough, the blue flame was more effective in dealing with this thing than the black flame. However, the beast's tooth that locked the door knocker was also an extraordinary item. Even if the blue flame was effective in dealing with it, the effect was minimal. Once again, Yu Qianzhou displayed his perseverance and indomitable spirit. He climbed onto the beast's head and sat on it. He used his blue flame to compress the saw knife and saw it with all his strength. After another half a day, the lower tooth of the beast's tooth was finally sawed off by him. The tusk, which was as long as a chopstick and as thick as a banana, was held in his hand. He couldn't tell what material it was made of. However, since it could be used here, it was definitely not an ordinary item. Therefore, he directly confiscated it. The door knocker was formed by the 4 tusks of the beast's head. After cutting off one lower tooth, he continued to saw the other lower tooth. After the other lower tooth was sawed off, the door knocker finally fell to the ground. Thump! It fell on the black soil and made a dull sound. Yu Qianzhou put away the beast's tooth and jumped down from the beast's head. He picked up the door knocker and immediately felt that it was extremely heavy. This fellow probably weighed more than 500 kilograms. However, with his current cultivation, this bit of weight was nothing. He knocked on it and looked at it over and over again, but he didn't find anything special about this door knocker. It was probably just that the material was special. Yu Qianzhou immediately felt a little depressed. He shook his head and muttered, "I thought it was some kind of treasure. I wasted so much effort. If there's a chance, I should let old man Bai take a look and see if it's useful." In the spirit of not going to waste, he also put away the door knocker. Yu Qianzhou turned back to look at the gate to the netherworld realm. He couldn't help but smile smugly. That heaven-devouring beast had lost 2 of its lower fangs and the ring it was holding in its mouth. That fellow, which had originally been rather imposing, immediately felt a lot less imposing. This was especially so when compared to the other heaven-devouring beast that it was fighting against. It seemed rather out of place. Moreover, the whole gate to the netherworld also seemed a little strange. It destroyed the overall eerie atmosphere. If someone had seen it later, they would definitely wonder if the netherworld was that poor. They couldn't even bear to spend money to clean up the facade of the gate to the netherworld. Looking at the other door knocker, Yu Qianqiu decided to let it go for the sake of the netherworld. Actually, he still felt that it was troublesome to get this thing down. Furthermore, it didn't seem to be of much use. Otherwise, with his temper, he wouldn't be so lucky. He would probably even pry open the gate to the netherworld. He had been extremely bold and destroyed the facade of the netherworld. It was a little too early for him to be happy. This greedy action had caused a lot of trouble in the future. Just think about it. After the netherworld discovered this, they would definitely send people out to investigate. The master and disciples' names on the cave wall would make it easy for the netherworld's people to find them. Once they left the 9th netherworld cave, the demon domain would definitely be the first to bear the brunt. Furthermore, Bai Chongqun was also an extremely bold and fearless person. He couldn't go to the netherworld to find people to spar with. If someone came looking for him, he would fight them. Regardless of whether they were in the sky or on the ground, regardless of victory or defeat, he would still fight them. Chapter 354. He rode the black flame flying sword back the way he had come. As he crossed the netherworld flame sea, he suddenly recalled something. Twilight Valley's underground had a blue lotus, a child, and a terrifying dragon. He wondered if there would also be one below. Yu Qianqiu glanced down at the sea of flames and immediately sensed that something was secretly observing him. He immediately felt a chill run down his spine. Perhaps it was just a psychological effect. He quickly passed through the sea of flames and returned to the cave entrance. The words on the cave wall were still there, the good and bad of the two characters clearly distinguishable. He was unwilling to accept this, but he suddenly recalled the cave he had dug. His eyebrows rose as he walked to the other side of the cave wall. He extended a finger, and with a flash of blue light, he began to earnestly write, "The tree planted by the predecessor, the shade enjoyed by the descendant. The eye of the wind is sad." This one was kind and dug a tunnel to make it convenient for the descendant to enter. Finally, he signed, Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu took a few steps back and nodded in satisfaction. He muttered, "One naturally has to leave their name after doing a good deed. At least it's a good example to learn from." He didn't know how many days he had been here, but it was time to go back. He thought of using teleportation to leave the 9 netherworld cave, but he felt that it was inappropriate, so he gave up. He strode back the way he had come. When he reached the area filled with the black fiend, his entire body ignited with black flames. Wisps of fiendish energy drifted out from the top of his head like black smoke. Compared to when he had been possessed by the blue flames, he now seemed to possess a heart-palpitating evil aura. Since the black fiend was produced by the black flames should be able to restrain the black fiend. This was what Yu Qianqiu thought, and the results did not disappoint him. The thick black fiend immediately dodged to the side when it encountered the black flames. The path ahead was too dark. Although the black flames were eye-catching, they had no illuminating effect. Yu Qianqiu threw out a blue flame flying sword and led the way. He quickly followed, quickly arriving at the cave he had dug. He glanced at the eye of the wind in front of him. Even with the protection of the black flames, he was still somewhat afraid. In the end, he decided to go through the tunnel. When they reached the end of the tunnel, they saw that the hole they dug at the beginning was too small and they had to crawl to get out. Hence, a few blue fire flying swords flew out and quickly made a beautiful exit. Then, with the black flame wrapped around him, he slowly stretched out a hand to test it. He saw several spinning wind blades coming at him turn into black fiends the moment they touched the black flame and were blown away by the chilly wind. He immediately felt relieved. Hee. People drive sports cars for a spin, but it seems like I have to ride a flying sword in the 9th netherworld cave. Yu Qianqiu laughed weirdly as he hopped onto the black flame flying sword. A green light shot out of the cave entrance and he chased after them. Who knew that as soon as he came out of the cave, he would almost be blown off the sword by the strong wind. Hence, he squatted on the sword to reduce the wind resistance, and only dared to stand up openly after flying for a long distance. Along the way, the green flame flying sword led the way. Riding on the black flame flying sword and protected by the black flame, he was not afraid of the yin wind and the black demon wind blades. In the 9th netherworld cave, Yu Qianqiu rode on the sword with the help of the wind. The speed he was traveling at was worlds apart from the speed he used to come here. In the cave, he fully displayed his superb sword-riding skills. He also quickly turned and skimmed through the twists and turns. Drifting on a flying sword, that was a great feeling. Just as a green light flashed by, one could see him quickly chasing after them while laughing wildly. Outside the 9th netherworld cave, a month had passed. Everyone was still waiting on the cliff for Yu Qianqiu to return. Too much time had passed, and everyone actually did not have much hope in their hearts. However, no one wanted to give up and hoped for a miracle. It should be known that if something happened to Yu Qianqiu here, who would bear the wrath of the torture master? It was not them. Zi was already sitting on the cliff, looking a little absent-minded. She was not worried about Yu Qianqiu's life or death. To be honest, she did not have a good impression of Yu Qianqiu's actions. The key was that Bai Changchun had personally asked her to come out and assist Yu Qianqiu. In the end, the person in charge died before the task was completed. How was she going to answer to Bai Changchun? Yu Ji and the other generals were also absent-minded. Everyone felt like their lives were hanging by a thread, and they were about to bear the wrath of the torture master at any time. Just thinking about it made them feel a little terrified. However, their worries were unnecessary. To Yu Qianqiu, this trip was just a daunting experience without any danger. Howl. A long howl that sounded like a ghost's wail came from the 9th netherworld cave with the help of the wind. Then, a green shadow shot out from the 9th netherworld cave and headed straight for the opposite cliff. When Yu Qianqiu was about to leave the cave, he suddenly retracted the black fire on his body and replaced it with the green fire. He also switched to an ordinary flying sword under his feet. The effect of the black fire was unknown, but it definitely had its unique power. Otherwise, it would not be ranked higher than the green fire. He decided to hide a trump card to be used at a critical moment. The flying sword pierced diagonally into the sky. When it flew past the cliff, the green shadow disappeared, and a figure jumped up from the flying sword. After a few somersaults in the air, he landed steadily among the crowd. His movements were very natural and unrestrained. The flying sword circled in the air and shot toward the person. With a clang, a cold light flashed, and it returned to the scabbard on his back. He was actually flying on a sword in the 9th netherworld cave. The crowd did not rejoice when they saw Yu Qianqiu. Instead, they were shocked. Zi stood up abruptly, and a look of joy flashed across her face. Yu Qianqiu looked at the crowd with a face full of smiles. He cupped his hands and said, "Sorry for making everyone wait." Yu Qianqiu apologizes. "Mr. is back." One of the generals happily shouted. The crowd reacted and immediately burst into cheers. It was the kind of cheers that came from the bottom of their hearts. Yu Ji patted her chest and let out a sigh of relief. She waved her hand at the crowd, and the cheers immediately stopped. She smiled and bowed. "Is Mr. well?" Yu Qianqiu looked at the crowd and laughed. "The 9th netherworld cave truly lives up to its name. I almost lost my life in there. However, I was able to see the words left by my master in the cave, so this trip was not in vain. Sister-in-law has been worried. Fortunately, there was no danger. Yu Qianqiu is well." Yu Ji's eyes lit up, and she asked, "Did Mr. reach the bottom of the cave? Did you see the legendary 9th netherworld door that leads to the netherworld?" When the crowd heard this, they all looked at Yu Qianqiu. Even Zi looked at him curiously. After all, that legendary place was not a place that anyone could go. It was good to listen and broaden their horizons. Yu Qianqiu smiled and shook his head. I am ashamed. I tried everything, but I could only reach the netherworld fire sea. It was difficult to take another step. It was a pity that I did not see the legendary ninth netherworld door. He thought that he was a low-profile person. A place that even old man Bai could not go. He would not be stupid enough to say that he went. That was purely looking for trouble. However, the crowd was envious. Yu Ji exclaimed, "It is not easy for Mr. to see the netherworld fire sea. I have been guarding this place for so many years, but I have not been able to see it." That's right, what did Mr. get? Yu Qianqiu did not answer her question and smiled noncommittally. He suddenly cupped his fists and said, I have troubled sister-in-law this time. However, I still have important matters to attend to. I will bid farewell to sister-in-law and everyone here. Yu Ji was startled. Seeing that he was not willing to say it clearly, she did not ask further. She bowed with some disappointment. Since Mr. has important matters to attend to, I will not force you to stay. I look forward to treating Mr. well next time. The ghost generals also bowed together. Have a safe journey, Mr. Yu Qianqiu looked at Zi and nodded. The sword on his back was unsheathed, and he turned into a stream of light and left. Zi lightly stamped her feet. Her delicate body flashed, and she shot into the sky to chase after him, leaving behind a group of people to send him off. Zi caught up to Yu Qianqiu. After flying with him for a while, she suddenly asked, Where are you going first? Yu Qianqiu turned around to look at her. Seeing that this lass was still cold when she asked, it was obvious that she had not changed her impression of him. He could not be bothered to argue with this insensible lass and replied indifferently, I am going to the Wu clan of the 4 great clans. They still owe me a large sum of money. I will collect the debt first. Chapter 355. What? Collect debts? Zi asked suspiciously. She thought she heard wrong. Yu Qianqiu nodded solemnly to show that she didn't hear wrong. He thought that it would be a waste to not bring a late-stage tribulation-passing cultivator as a bodyguard. Of course, he wouldn't say this out loud. Ziyi's cold face immediately became even colder. It was as cold as ice. She said in an icy tone, Yu Qianqiu, don't delay Senior Bai's instructions for your own personal matters. I didn't come out with you to collect debts. Not collecting debts. Are you going to give me money? Yu Qianqiu asked curiously. Humph. Do I owe you money? Zi said coldly. Yu Qianqiu asked again, then do you have money on you? Zi was startled. What money? What money are you talking about? Yu Qianqiu countered with a question. Spirit stones. Zi frowned. What does it have to do with spirit stones? I don't have spirit stones. Silly girl. Gullible. Yu Qianqiu thought for a moment and said angrily, don't you know that we need to spend money when we go out? My master gave us such an important mission. We have to travel around the cultivation world and there will be many places where we need to spend money. My master didn't give me money and I don't have money on me. You don't have money either. What about our food and lodging? Do you want me to accompany you to the cultivation world to beg for food? How are we going to work then? Do we really need spirit stones? Zi didn't have much experience so she asked unconfidently, there are many places to stay in the mountains. You're at the original infant stage so you should be able to abstain from eating. It should be fine if you don't eat. Yu Qianqiu said, then what do we do when we find someone to work for us? Do we make them work and not pay them? If we don't know each other and I ask you to work for me for no reason, would you be willing to do it? Zi thought about it and said, no, unless you give me a good reason. That's it. Yu Qianqiu spread his hands and said, Master asked the two of us to deal with so many people, of course I have to find someone to help me. They don't care about reason, they only want money. They will only help you if you give them money. Do you think you can defeat all the experts in the cultivation world alone? Zi shook her head, indicating that she wouldn't be able to defeat so many people by herself. She then asked, then how many spirit stones do we need to carry out the task that Senior Bai instructed us to do? I need a lot of spirit stones. That's a huge number. Yu Qianqiu let out a deep sigh. He suddenly turned his head and asked, Your master is a spirit-severing expert, so he must have a lot of money, right? Why don't you go to the South Sea purple bamboo forest to get some spirit stones? We don't have any spirit stones, Zi said awkwardly. Yu Qianqiu was a little unhappy. Don't tell me you don't need spirit stones when you cultivate. You can't just use spirit pills, right? The purple bamboo forest produces dense spirit qi every night. I've never used spirit stones when I cultivate, so I really don't have any, Zi explained. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. He asked, the purple bamboo forest produces spirit qi at night. Is it that magical? Why don't we go and dig a few? We might be able to use them as spirit stones. No, my master loves bamboo like his life. People call him Mr. Nongzhu. He won't allow anyone to touch a single bamboo. Zi waved her hand and bit her lip. Since collecting the debt is related to Senior Bai, I'll go with you to collect the debt. At this point, Yu Qianqiu couldn't force her anymore. However, he remembered the matter about the purple bamboo in his heart and prepared to come back in the future. He let out a long sigh. Zi, I won't hide it from you. Even if we collect the debt this time, I'm sure we still need a lot of spirit stones. For the sake of my master, I'll have to trouble you with the spirit stones in the future. This is related to Senior Bai. I'll definitely do my best and not let Senior Bai down. Zi said with a determined expression. That's good, that's good. After this is over, I'll definitely report to Master about your dedication. Yu Qianqiu spoke in a serious tone, but in his heart, he was thinking about how he could get the daughter of a deity transformation cultivator to help out with spirit stones. For example, she would be an expert in robbery. No need. It's my honor to work for Senior Bai. Zi said very politely. She didn't notice that she had fallen into Yu Qianqiu's trap. Yu Ji's territory was on the outskirts of the demon ghost region. While the two of them were talking, they had already passed through the gloomy world and left the demon ghost region. When the bright and beautiful sunlight suddenly appeared, Yu Qianqiu identified the direction and led Zi towards the Wu clan of the four major clans. This time, he had received orders and could openly wander around the cultivation world. At least, he didn't need to be afraid of being discovered by Bai Changchun. After a few days of non-stop flying, the two of them finally arrived at the Wu clan's Hat Island. There were many shops and people coming and going. It was a very lively place in the cultivation world. Zi had stayed in the South Sea's purple bamboo forest since she was a child. She rarely came out. The only reason she could come out was because her teacher had brought her to the mountains and lakes to pay a visit to an expert. She had never seen such a lively scene before. She could not help but look around curiously. As she walked, she accidentally distanced herself from Yu Qianqiu. After she came back to her senses, she quickly caught up. Zi rarely came into contact with the world. She had an extraordinary temperament. Coupled with her extraordinary appearance and eye-catching purple clothes, how could such a beauty not attract the attention of passers-by? Even Yu Qianqiu was constantly being looked at by people. Many of them looked at him with envy. They were all men. Yu Qianqiu understood what everyone was thinking. However, this girl's background was too powerful. Without confidence, no matter how delicious the meat was, it was not good to eat it. Otherwise, he wouldn't even know when one of his teeth was knocked out. He was a little afraid of the shrewd Nongju. Although Yu Qianqiu rarely showed himself in the cultivation world, he was quite famous. Many people had seen him. Naturally, people recognized him when he was on the road. Immediately, someone said softly, "Look at that person. Isn't that Yu Qianqiu? Hey! Huanjin, that scum of the cultivation world, has some guts. He killed the son of the Daluo sect's leader and still dares to parade around here. He must be tired of living. Stop talking. That guy is famous for being a lunatic. There is no one he doesn't dare to fight. Be careful that you will be killed by his starflame fire spell before the Daluo sect can find him." Those who could be here were all cultivators. Their ears and eyes were much sharper than mortals. As soon as the name of Yu Qianqiu was mentioned, it immediately caused a commotion. He was a famous person in the past. Not only did he kill the son of the Daluo sect's leader, but he also killed the leader of the Daluo sect, Ong Guangcang. How many people in the cultivation world would have the guts to do that? Most of the people on the street consciously stood on both sides and made a path for them. They whispered to each other as if they were ready to watch the show. Yu Qianqiu heard a lot of people's conversation, but he pretended not to hear it. He brought an expert in the end stage of the God's test to go shopping. He was not afraid of anything. He was not afraid of anyone looking for trouble. Ziyi didn't know that she had become Yu Qianqiu's support. When she heard everyone whispering about Yu Qianqiu, she couldn't help but look at him a few more times. She didn't expect him to be so famous in the cultivation world. When they passed by the shop on Fuxian Island, the shop manager, Wan Yuan, also heard the news and stood in front of the shop. He was an acquaintance of Yu Qianqiu. When Yu Qianqiu saw him, he was stunned. He remembered that Wan Yuan had no enmity with him and had taken care of him before. He immediately nodded with respect. Wan Yuan shook his head and sighed. This disciple was actually quite good. He also felt that it was a pity that the sect lost such an outstanding disciple. When the two of them walked to the Gulu residence and were about to enter, they saw a waiter wearing the Wu clan's clothing running out. When he saw Yu Qianqiu, he bowed and called out, "Mr. Yu." After that, a flying sword flew out of the storage bag, and he quickly flew towards the Wu clan. Was he going to report? Yu Qianqiu sneered and glanced at him. He led Ziyi in. The shopkeeper heard the news and walked over quickly. He bowed and said, "Mr. Yu has arrived. Please go to the private room upstairs." The Wu clan was looking for Yu Qianqiu everywhere. How could he dare to neglect him? "I have a distinguished guest. Bring me the best dishes," Yu Qianqiu said bluntly and went upstairs with Ziyi. The customers downstairs all watched as he went upstairs. The clean and tidy private room was open to receive the guests. The shopkeeper personally welcomed the two of them in and asked if they had any special requests. Yu Qianqiu said to Ziyi, who was looking around curiously, "Ziyi, order whatever you want to eat. It'll be a waste if we don't eat. Someone will treat us later. We don't have to pay for it." This guy's tone was unkind. The shopkeeper's expression changed. He smiled awkwardly and said, "You don't have to pay for it. As long as our shop has it, order whatever you want." Before he could finish his words, there was a commotion coming from below. Someone laughed and said, "Once this lunatic appears, there will be a show to watch immediately. This is great." A group of people ignored the Wu clansman's obstruction and forcefully rushed up. The leader was the manager of Daluo sect's shop on Hat Island, Yi Haiping. He had met Yu Qianqiu before, so they knew each other. As soon as he entered the private room, he shouted at Yu Qianqiu, "Yu Qianqiu, you finally show your face. Don't even think about running away today." The shopkeeper's expression changed. He said coldly, "Manager Yi, what do you mean? You brought people to break into my gula house. Don't you think you have no respect for the Wu clan? Shopkeeper Wu, we, Daluo sect, have offended you today. We will come to apologize another day. This man killed many of our disciples. We can't let him go today, no matter what. Yi Haiping cupped his fist and said. What a joke. Yu Qianzhou sneered and sat down. He looked at Yi Haiping and said disdainfully, Yi Haiping, what do you think of your cultivation compared to Zhu Xianxin's? He tried to escape when he saw me, but you guys dare to say that you won't let me go? Aren't you overestimating yourselves? His cultivation was no longer the same as it used to be. He had reached the original infant stage. Most of the people from Daluo sect were at the core formation stage. Only Yi Haiping's cultivation was higher than his. However, Yi Haiping's cultivation was no higher than the passing calamity stage. Otherwise, he wouldn't be the manager of this shop. Yu Qianzhou's fire spell was extremely powerful. He didn't even care about the passing calamity stage. Why would he be afraid of a group of people like this? Plus, he had Zi, who was at the final stage of the passing calamity stage. Chapter 356. In fact, even if Yu Qianzhou didn't say it, Yi Haiping knew that they were at a disadvantage. In the battle outside the Hundred Flowers Valley, Yu Qianzhou single-handedly killed several Daluo sect nascent soul disciples. Even the sect master's only son died at his hands. He even forced Elder Zhu Xianxian to retreat. Yu Qianzhou's starflame fire art became famous after that battle. Now that their cultivation was far inferior to those of the same sect, how could they take advantage of the situation? However, Yu Qianzhou's appearance on Hat Island had attracted everyone's attention. As the representative of Daluo sect on Hat Island, he had no choice but to come even if he knew he was no match for Yu Qianzhou. If he retreated, not only would the world of cultivation laugh at him, the Daluo sect master would be the first to punish him. The ashen-faced Yi Haiping was in a dilemma when the sound of hurried footsteps came from downstairs. Wu Sihai personally came with a smile on his face and a few elders. But when he saw Yi Haiping and his people blocking the door, his face immediately sank and he said, "What is the meaning of this?" The innkeeper hurriedly bowed and explained the whole story from beginning to end. Wu Sihai immediately said in a deep voice, "Manager Yi, your Daluo sect is indeed a large sect, but the world of cultivation has its own rules. How dare you be so arrogant? Do you think the four great clans are easy to bully? Yi Haiping, are your actions today representing the Daluo sect?" Yi Haiping's expression was uncertain. He suddenly cupped his fists and said, "I, Yi Haiping, cannot represent the entire Daluo sect, nor do I dare to bully the four great clans. Wu family head, I have offended you today. Let me report this matter to the sect first. Farewell." Without another word, he turned around and left, quickly leading the group of disciples downstairs. In fact, Wu Sihai's arrival gave him a chance to step down. When he reported to the sect, he could say that because the Wu clan's clan head, one of the four great clans, had interfered, he could naturally avoid punishment. He could also avoid direct conflict with Yu Qianzhou. "Humph. I won't send you off." Wu Sihai coldly snorted, expressing his dissatisfaction. When he turned around to look at Yu Qianzhou, a smile once again appeared on his face. When he saw the extraordinarily beautiful Zi, he couldn't help but frown. He didn't know what relationship she had with Yu Qianzhou, and he thought of his own granddaughter. However, he still smiled and said, "Yu Qianzhou, you really made it easy for our Wu clan to find you. Previously, it was really a misunderstanding. Please don't take it to heart." Yu Qianzhou raised an eyebrow and sneered, "Let's not talk about this now. I'm hungry. If you have anything to say, you can talk after you're full." "Good. Good. You should talk after you're full. Bring out the best wine and dishes." Wu Sihai ordered the shopkeeper beside him. After the shopkeeper left, he sat in front of Yu Qianqiu and kept smiling. He didn't know what to say. Finally, he looked at Zi and nodded with a smile. This young lady's cultivation is obviously higher than mine. I'm afraid she is an expert at the final stage of the crossing calamity stage. However, she looks unfamiliar. May I know which sect she is from? Ever since there were many people, Ziyi's expression hadn't changed at all in front of outsiders. She hadn't opened her mouth to speak. Now that Wu Sihai asked her, she looked at Yu Qianqiu and said, "Is this the person who owes you money?" This question was a bit too direct and didn't beat around the bush at all. Wu Sihai, who was pouring himself a cup of tea, choked when he heard this. He forcefully swallowed the tea in his mouth and coughed repeatedly as he looked at Yu Qianqiu. He thought, did this brat bring an expert here to collect the debt? Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu cheered in his heart. It was really great to have this stubborn girl here. He wanted to use Old Man Bai's name to suppress Old Man Bai's juniors and make it easier for him to earn money. However, if Old Man Bai found out, he didn't know what the consequences would be. He didn't know what to say. Why didn't he think of using this girl? Old Man Bai definitely wouldn't do anything to this girl. He had an idea in his heart, but on the surface, he said nonchalantly, "Let's talk after eating." As expected, Ziyi frowned slightly and said, "Yu Qianqiu, is your food more important or what Old Man Bai told us more important?" As soon as the words, "Old Man Bai," came out, Wu Sihai and the four elders behind him changed their expressions. Wu Sihai couldn't sit still anymore. He jumped up and asked, "Is the Old Man Bai you mentioned my ancestor?" Ziyi's expression was indifferent. She said straightforwardly, "I don't know you, nor do I know your ancestor." Wu Sihai was speechless. He looked at Yu Qianqiu anxiously. Yu Qianqiu understood their feelings. Rubbing his hands together, he explained embarrassedly, "She's the disciple of your ancestor's best friend. Her master is also an incredible figure." Wu Sihai and the others were shocked. Bai Changchun was a soul formation final stage expert. His friend would not be an ordinary person. No wonder this girl looked so young but had the cultivation of tribulation final stage. For a moment, Wu Sihai and the four elders stood up and bowed to Ziyi. They seemed a little reserved. Ziyi looked at Yu Qianqiu in confusion and said, "What's going on?" Old Man Bai's surname is Bai, and their surname is Wu. Why would they call Old Man Bai ancestor? Besides, I never heard my master say that Old Man Bai has a son outside. Even if it's true, as Old Man Bai's direct disciple, how can you ask Old Man Bai's descendant for money? Yu Qianqiu was Old Man Bai's direct disciple? This news was no less than a heavy bomb. Wu Sihai and the others were shocked. Although they didn't know whether it was true or not, it was enough to stun them. Enough, enough. Saying this was enough to collect the debt. Yu Qianqiu held back the joy in his heart. He glanced at Wu Sihai and the others and said awkwardly, "Ahem, Ziyi, don't mention my master casually in the future. My master doesn't want me to use his name to do things." "Is this Old Man Bai's idea?" Ziyi frowned and said unhappily, "Why didn't you say so earlier?" The private room immediately quieted down. Only the sound of Yu Qianqiu drinking tea could be heard. Not long after, the manager and the waiters of Gula House filled the table with food and wine. After the food and wine were served, the manager also found that the atmosphere was a little strange. He looked at the family head with an inquiring look. Wu Sihai waved his hand and asked them to leave. After they left, an elder closed the door with a serious face. Yu Qianqiu pretended to be embarrassed to face Ziyi's blaming eyes. He picked up the chopsticks and buried himself in the food. Just like he said, if there was anything, they could talk after they were full. Ziyi saw him eat so much that he forgot himself. She looked at the delicious dishes on the table and even picked up her chopsticks to taste them carefully. Wu Sihai and the others stood aside silently. They didn't know what to say. Especially Wu Sihai, thinking of the relationship between his granddaughter and Yu Qianqiu, his mind was in a mess. According to the relationship between him and his granddaughter, he should be his grandson-in-law. If he was really the direct disciple of Old Man Bai, then what about the seniority? Chapter 357. When he was almost done eating, Yu Qianqiu put down his chopsticks and grabbed a white handkerchief to wipe his mouth. Zi looked at him and followed suit. She put down her chopsticks and grabbed the white handkerchief on the table. Bill. Yu Qianqiu suddenly shouted. The Wu clan's people came to their senses and looked at each other. Zi felt strange and asked in a low voice, "Didn't you say someone is treating us?" Treating? In your dreams. This table of dishes costs a lot of spiritual stones. You want to treat us? Yu Qianqiu said impatiently. He thought to himself, this girl dares to undermine me at such a crucial time. I don't have any spiritual stones. Zi was like a child who had done something wrong. She then remembered that she had no money, but she ate his food. She blushed and said in a low voice, "How about you pay for me first? When I go back and see my master, I will ask him if he has any. I will pay you back then." Damn! Is this cold humor? Who said that this girl had a one-track mind? She is clearly threatening me. Do I dare to let Nongzhu know about this? I will be tortured by that guy. Yu Qianqiu's face twitched. He waved his hand and said, "Forget it. I will pay for you. You don't have to pay me back." After listening to their conversation, Wu Sihai finally understood. This girl in purple seemed to have a high cultivation, but she was as innocent as a piece of white paper. How could she resist Yu Qianqiu's tricks? However, this also indicated a problem. The violet-clothed woman's words from before were probably true. Wu Sihai shook his head and smiled bitterly. No need to pay, no need to pay. This meal is on me. Unexpectedly, Yu Qianqiu did not appreciate it. He sneered and said, "Senior Wu, I don't object if you want to treat us. But let me make it clear first. This meal has nothing to do with the spiritual stones that your Wu clan owes me. You still have to pay me back. Our Wu clan never said that we won't pay you back." Wu Sihai said helplessly. "That's good." Yu Qianqiu stretched out his hand and said happily, "Where are the spiritual stones? Now give it back to me. More than 60 million upper spiritual stones. How could I carry it with me all the time?" Wu Sihai smiled bitterly and said, "Yu Qianqiu, this isn't a good place to talk. You should follow me back to the Wu clan first. I will definitely give you a spirit stone." "I don't dare." Yu Qianqiu scanned the Wu clan's elders in the room and snorted coldly. "Wu Xinggang tried to kill me previously, and I still remember it clearly." Wu Sihai sighed and said, "It's purely a misunderstanding. Since it's already over, don't be so calculated for Shue's sake." Snow. Wu Lixue. Why did he have to mention her out of nowhere? Yu Qianqiu looked at her suspiciously. Could it be that the adultery was exposed? Just at this moment, there was a cheerful noise coming from downstairs. Before he could see anyone, he heard a lady's crisp voice shouting, "Yu Qianqiu, is that you?" Hearing this familiar voice, Yu Qianqiu's expression changed instantly. Who else could it be if it wasn't Wu Lixue's voice? As expected, when the door was pushed open, Wu Lixue looked around with a face full of joy. She immediately saw Yu Qianqiu, who was staring at her in a daze. Just as she was about to run over, she heard a slight call from the side. When she saw her grandfather and the elders at the side, she immediately clenched her hands and stopped talking. She stood beside Wu Sihai obediently, but her eyes were filled with tenderness when she looked at a certain someone. At the same time, when she saw that there was a beautiful lady in purple next to Yu Qianqiu, she couldn't help but have some doubts. The 4 Wu clan's elders weren't fools, and their faces were filled with doubts too. Wu Sihai coughed and spoke again. Yu Qianqiu, we can talk about everything clearly. This isn't the place to talk. You should make a trip to my Wu clan first. Yu Qianqiu originally wanted to put on airs, but when he saw Wu Lishue's eyes that were filled with anticipation, he nodded helplessly. Quiet guest house. Wu Sihai said that he was going to gather spirit stones, so he asked Yu Qianqiu to wait for a day. Then, he arranged for Yu Qianqiu and Zi to stay here temporarily. Wu Lishue was rather daring. That night, she stayed in Yu Qianqiu's room and didn't leave for the whole night. Since her family already knew about the matter between her and Yu Qianqiu, she might as well not avoid it anymore. After all, a long absence makes the heart grow fonder. The next day, the man and woman who indulged themselves for the whole night only pushed open the door late in the morning. In the courtyard, the purple-clothed lady, who was already standing upright, slowly turned around and looked at the two of them suspiciously. What were the two of you doing for the whole night? You didn't stop yelling. Wu Lishue's captivating redness immediately spread to her neck. She said in a low voice, I'll go back first. After that, she quickly left. Yu Qianqiu immediately rolled his eyes at Zi and said, You won't understand even if I tell you. You'll understand when you yell endlessly. When he said that, Zi was even more confused. At this moment, Wu Liqing walked in from outside the courtyard. When he saw Yu Qianqiu, he stopped on the spot with an indescribable expression. When Yu Qianqiu saw him, he was also a little embarrassed. After all, he had slept with his friend's sister. Even if he was in the right, the two of them looked at each other for a while. In the end, Wu Liqing cupped his fists and said, Brother Yu, my grandfather invites the two of you to the ancestral hall for a discussion. As he said that, his gaze paused on Zi for a moment. A hint of brilliance flashed in his eyes, and his originally tense expression gradually relaxed. The three of them arrived at the Wu clan's ancestral hall in silence. When they looked around, the entire ancestral hall looked brand new. It was obvious that it had been renovated after the fire. The main culprit, Yu Qianqiu, didn't feel that anything was wrong. What made him feel strange was that the Wu clan's ancestral hall, which never allowed women to enter, actually allowed Zi to enter. Inside the ancestral hall, there were many people. Even the 4 clan heads were there. It was obvious that they had rushed here overnight. Yu Qianqiu squinted his eyes. The 6 elders in the main hall attracted his attention. 3 of them were the 3 experts at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage that day when he burned the Wu clan's ancestral hall. Seeing that Yu Qianqiu was staring at the 6 elders, Wu Sihai, who was in charge of this place, introduced them to him. It turned out that not only did the clan heads of the 4 clans come, but they also brought an elder at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage. The 3 elders that he knew were all elders of the Wu clan. The reason why the 4 clans rushed here overnight with such a huge lineup was naturally because they had received the news from Wu Sihai. Yu Qianqiu was most likely the direct disciple of the Wu clan's ancestor. When they heard this news, all the higher-ups of the 4 clans were shocked. The elders with the highest seniority followed the clan heads and rushed here overnight to confirm it. The reason why Wu Sihai delayed Yu Qianqiu for a day was because this was not just a matter of 1 clan, but 4 clans. He needed to wait for the 4 clan heads to arrive. After both parties got to know each other, Wu Sihai solemnly said to Yu Qianqiu, I heard from this lady in purple yesterday that you are the direct disciple of the 4 clans' ancestor. Is what she said true? What do you mean, true or false? Yu Qianqiu looked around at everyone and sneered, You asked me to wait for you to gather spirit stones. I have already waited for a day. Where are my spirit stones? Not only did you blame me last time, you even tried to kill me to silence me. Do you want to do it again today? The atmosphere in the ancestral hall suddenly became a little awkward. Wu Sihai coughed and said, Yu Qianqiu, I will definitely give you spirit stones. It's just that there are some things I want to clarify with you. Damn it. He would only be at ease if he got the money. What happened last time would not happen again. Yu Qianqiu did not care so much. He spread out his hand and said, If you have anything to say, give me the money first. Ziyi's pretty face was also tense. She took a step forward and stood next to Yu Qianqiu. Because Yu Qianqiu said that the problem of money was related to Elder Bai's great trust, she now thought that gathering money was also part of her responsibility. Naturally, she had to support Yu Qianqiu. The 6 elders' eyes fell on Ziyi, and their pupils shrank. Wu Zhen, the oldest elder in the Wu clan, suddenly said, Sihai, how many spirit stones do we owe him? Wu Sihai turned around and bowed, 68 million superior-grade spirit stones. Wu Zhen said without hesitation, give him 70 million, now. Soon, someone came with a storage bag. Wu Sihai handed the storage bag to Yu Qianqiu and said, check it. In fact, it did not need to be so troublesome. Yu Qianqiu roughly scanned the storage bag with his divine sense and knew that it was almost the same. After putting the storage bag away, he looked at the crowd and suddenly sighed, It's not that I care about the spirit stones. It's just that I have a heavy responsibility and I need a lot of spirit stones. I'm sorry, everyone. Wu Sihai asked, I've given you the spirit stones. Can you answer my question now? Sigh. Why are you so obsessed? Do you know what it means to you? Yu Qianqiu smiled bitterly and said, I don't want to tell you some things because I don't want to implicate you. Otherwise, I'm afraid I won't be able to explain it to my master when I go back. Although he did not give a direct answer, the meaning of his words was very obvious. In the ancestral hall, everyone looked at Yu Qianqiu with a hint of respect. Wu Sihai asked, So, you admit that you're the great ancestor's personal disciple? Yu Qianqiu was shaking his head and sighing. He was about to answer when he saw someone running in quickly and reporting to Wu Sihai, Master, Daluo sect Master Luo Qingtian has personally come to Hat Island and wants to see the Master. He wants to see Yu Qianqiu by name. Everyone's eyes turned to Yu Qianqiu. Daluo sect was the second-ranked sect in the Huaxia cultivation world. Its sect master Luo Qingtian had a high status. Now that he had come in person, it was probably not to see the Wu clan's master, but to settle the grudge between him and Yu Qianqiu. At this time, 2 more people ran in from outside and reported to Wu Sihai, supporting Immortal Island's elder Dongfang Changgao seeks an audience with Patriarch, and Myriad Demons Temple's elder Qiu Wuyuan seeks an audience with Patriarch. Chapter 358. The ancestral shrine suddenly quieted down. Everyone looked at each other with a puzzled expression. 3 powerful figures from the cultivation world had come down. It was still reasonable for Luo Qingtian to come here at this time, but why did Dongfang Chang, Ao and Qiu Wuyuan come here to join in the fun? Everyone looked at Yu Qianqiu. Could it be that this guy had formed an irreconcilable enmity with the number 1 sect of the righteous and devil sects? Wu Sihai looked at Yu Qianqiu speechlessly. His idea that had been proven many times had been verified again. This kid really had problems wherever he went. Needless to say, Luo Qingtian represented the Daluo sect, and Dongfang Chang, Ao and Qiu Wuyuan were definitely the representatives of the righteous and devil sects. Whenever the 2 sects wanted to deal with something in the cultivation world, the 2 of them would usually be the representatives. The 3 powerful figures came here when Yu Qianqiu just showed up. It would be strange if they didn't come for this guy. Yu Qianqiu, who was at the side, raised his brows and sneered without saying a word. He didn't care about the other 2, but Luo Qingtian was definitely here for him. The patriarchs of the 4 major families and the 6 elders exchanged glances and nodded as if they had made a decision. Wu Sihai walked to Yu Qianzhou's side and said in a deep voice, "The Daluo sect master wants to see you." I'm afraid that Daluo sect's experts have already been set up around the Wu clan. It won't be easy for you to leave the Wu clan smoothly. If you nod and confirm that you are the direct disciple of the old ancestor, the 4 major families will protect you even if we have to fall out with the Daluo sect. No need. Yu Qianzhou snorted coldly, and a disdainful aura suddenly burst out. He looked around and said coldly, "A mere Daluo sect master doesn't need to use my master's name to protect his life. Zi, let's go and meet that Luo Qingtian." His words were filled with arrogance, especially when coupled with his imposing manner. It was as if he was a completely different person. Zi had always revered Bai Changchun, not to mention that even her own master felt inferior to him. In her heart, there was no one who could be on par with Bai Changchun. Now that she heard Yu Qianzhou's words, her pretty face immediately turned frosty. How could a mere sect leader be mentioned in the same breath as Elder Bai? She immediately followed Yu Qianzhou out of the ancestral shrine. Everyone in the ancestral hall fell silent. Wu Zhen exchanged a look with the other elders inside. The 4 families were founded by our great ancestor. How can we sit back and watch our great ancestor's direct disciple get into trouble? We old guys are here to watch. You 4 represent the 4 families to protect him. The 4 clan heads accepted the order and followed out. At the same time, 10 Wu clan elders also nodded and followed. The Wu clan's residence was only separated by a river from Hat Island. Yu Qianzhou and Zi walked to the top of the arch bridge. Looking around, there were already many people gathered on the other side of the bridge to watch the show. However, there was a large empty space near the bridge with only a few people standing there. The people who stood on both sides like enemies were naturally Dongfang Cheng, Ao and Qiu Weiyuan. Between the 2 of them, there was a person with his back facing the river bridge. He was burly and wore a black robe. Beside him stood 2 guards respectfully. Yi Haiping also stood at the side with his hands folded. Could that person be the Daluo sect leader, Luo Qingtian? Yu Qianzhou squinted his eyes and stared at that person. Yu Qianzhou is here. Someone shouted, and the surrounding crowd immediately became restless. The person in the black robe turned around abruptly and happened to meet Yu Qianzhou's gaze from afar. At this time, the 4 clan heads behind the 2 of them led the 10 Wu clan elders to pass them and walk towards the people at the bridge. Both sides immediately exchanged greetings. Later, if we fight, we can't let our master's reputation down. Yu Qianzhou said softly to Zi, who was beside him. He didn't forget to add, my master always kills when he can. He won't let a single one of them go. Zi nodded with a firm gaze. Yu Qianzhou could be considered to have grasped her pulse. Everything was related to Bai Changchun, and he guaranteed that she would listen to him obediently. This girl was Bai Changchun's hardcore fan. When the 2 of them walked to the bridge, they saw Qiu Weiyuan walking towards them. He laughed loudly and said, "Brother Yu. Long time no see. Senior Qiu." Yu Qianzhou walked over and cupped his hands in greeting enthusiastically. Qiu Weiyuan saw Zi beside him and was stunned. He said, "Could she be brother's confidant?" "No." Zi denied it coldly. Qiu Weiyuan wanted to make fun of them, but when he saw that Ziyi's cultivation was higher than his joke got stuck in his throat. He was just a little curious. How come he had never seen a woman with such cultivation before? "Senior, why are you here?" Yu Qianzhou asked. "Nothing." Qiu Weiyuan turned his head and looked at Luo Qingtian and Dongfang Cheng, Ao with a smile. He said, "First of all, I'm here to watch the show. Secondly, I heard that brother appeared in the Wu clan, so I came here to ask if brother is interested in joining my 10,000 demons. As soon as he said this, Luo Qingtian's gaze collided with Qiu Weiyuan's. The former stopped his conversation with the four major clans' patriarchs and walked over slowly. He looked at Yu Qianqiu and asked, "You are Yu Qianqiu?" Luo Qingtian was a strong old man with dark hair and two slanted snow-white eyebrows. His eyes were cold and steady, and he exuded the aura of a superior. Yu Qianqiu looked at him and replied indifferently, "Yes, I am." "May I know why Sect Master Luo wants to see me?" "Yu Qianqiu, do you think you can pretend to be ignorant today?" Luo Qingtian shouted in a deep voice. A faint tyrannical aura was emitted from his body, and it seemed like he would make a move at any time. At this moment, the four patriarchs exchanged glances and walked over together. They stood behind Yu Qianqiu, and the atmosphere was self-evident. The surrounding crowd was in an uproar again. The four major clans were showing their attitude to stand on Yu Qianqiu's side. Didn't that mean that they were going to be enemies with the Daluo sect? Qiu Weiyuan, who was smiling silently at the side, had his eyes lit up. He chuckled and said, "Interesting." He moved his feet and actually stood side by side with the four patriarchs. It was normal for evil Dao and righteous Dao to go against each other. Luo Qingtian ignored Qiu Weiyuan and glanced at the four patriarchs coldly. He said in a deep voice, "Are the four major clans going to be enemies with the Daluo sect?" "We don't dare." Wu Sihai cupped his fists and said, "Yu Qianqiu is a guest invited by the four major clans. The four major clans will not let anything happen to the guest in our territory." It was very clear that the four major clans were going to protect Yu Qianqiu today, even if it meant going against the Daluo sect. Luo Qingtian's snow-white brows pricked up, and the atmosphere instantly became tense. Dongfang Chang Ao walked over and said, "China's cultivation world is in a crisis now, and it is time for us to defend against external enemies together. All the sects must not have internal strife. I will represent supporting Immortal Island to advise everyone to discuss this." Luo Qingtian turned back and took a glance before saying coldly, "Could Elder Dongfang be stopping me from taking revenge for my son?" Dongfang Chang Ao waved his hand and said, "Sect Master Luo is mistaken. I heard that Sect Master Luo is going to visit the Wu clan personally, so I was immediately sent here. Before I came, my supporting Immortal Island Sect Master had instructed me repeatedly that if it is a personal grudge, supporting Immortal Island will not interfere. However, if it involves a battle between sects, the impact will be too great, and my supporting Immortal Island will have to interfere." Dongfang Chang Ao, are you using supporting Immortal Island to pressure me? Do you really think that I am afraid of your supporting Immortal Island? Luo Qingtian shouted in a deep voice. "Sect Master Luo, please don't misunderstand. It is just that the cultivation world is in a crisis now, and you should be clearer than me. At this moment, we really should not expand our personal grudges. I hope that Sect Master Luo will reconsider." Dongfang Chang Ao persuaded. "All right." Luo Qingtian suddenly pointed at Yu Qianqiu and shouted, "I will abandon my position as Sect Master and settle my personal grudge with him. Will he agree?" Dongfang Chang Ao frowned slightly and looked at Yu Qianqiu. "Yu Qianqiu, what do you think?" Before Yu Qianqiu could reply, Zi took a step forward with a cold expression and spoke to Luo Qingtian coldly, "You are the Daluo sect master. Are you tired of living?" A young woman actually dared to speak to the Daluo sect master in such a manner. Everyone was shocked, and when they realized that they couldn't see through Ziyi's cultivation, they were all speechless. "Ziyi, come back." Yu Qianqiu gently pulled Ziyi's arm and said with a faint smile, "Since someone pointed at my nose and challenged me to a duel, how can I retreat? Let me meet the world-renowned Daluo sect master." Chapter 359. As soon as he said that, the surrounding people were in an uproar. Yu Qianqiu actually agreed to fight with Luo Qingtian, the sect master of Daluo sect. Did Yu Qianqiu really think that his cultivation could compete with Luo Qingtian, who was in the middle stage of passing calamity? Everyone was shocked and felt that this was a joke. They were laughing at Yu Qianqiu for overestimating himself. They were laughing at Yu Qianqiu for being a madman. Ziyi obediently retreated, and there was a faint look of excitement on her face. She had never seen Bai Changchun, whom she admired, in action, but seeing the disciple of the world's #1 expert in action was enough to satisfy her curiosity. She was looking forward to it very much. Dongfang Chang Ao frowned. Yu Qianqiu, the disciple who was expelled from supporting Xian Island, was loved and hated by everyone in supporting Xian Island. It seemed that they loved him more because he did not do anything excessive to supporting Xian Island. He was even appreciated by the older generation of supporting Xian Island. At a young age, he made a big name for himself in the cultivation world. To be honest, the people of supporting Xian Island were proud of him, and the disciples of the younger generation even idolized him. With such a talented and outstanding disciple, he was already included in the list of disciples that the supporting Immortal Island would focus on nurturing. It was believed that in a few years, the supporting Immortal Island would have a resounding figure in the cultivation world and add glory to the island. However, because of the Azure Light sect that had already been destroyed, Yu Qianqiu, who contradicted the sect master, was expelled from the sect by Feng Xiangtian in a fit of anger. After this incident, many people in supporting Xian Island felt that it was a pity. However, in order to maintain the prestige of the sect master, no one mentioned this matter again. However, after the extermination of the Azure Light sect, Yu Qianqiu used his self-created Starflame Fire technique outside the 100 Flowers Valley to make a name for himself in the cultivation world. This matter caused a stir in the supporting Immortal Island. The entire supporting Immortal Island was talking about it. Many people began to mention Yu Qianqiu again. Some even suggested to recall Yu Qianqiu back to the supporting Immortal Island. These people's reason was that Yu Qianqiu was expelled by An Kuangceng. Now that An Kuangceng was dead, no one would pursue the past, so it was possible to recall Yu Qianqiu back to supporting Xian Island. For this matter, Ma Jiugu personally went to Feng Xiangtian to plead for leniency. Ma Jiugu said, "It's true that Yu Qianqiu was in the wrong, but now that An Kuangceng is dead, and his exposure of the father and son of the Yan clan contributed to supporting Xian Island, it can be seen that he still has supporting Xian Island in his heart. At the same time, his exposure also contributed to the entire cultivation world. This is the most suitable excuse to recall Yu Qianqiu back to supporting Xian Island." However, Feng Xiangtian was worried that Yu Qianqiu had killed the Daluo sect master's son and a group of disciples outside the 100 Flowers Valley. In the end, Ma Jiugu said bluntly, many people in the cultivation world witnessed what happened. It was clearly Daluo sect who provoked Yu Qianqiu first. Moreover, both sides agreed not to pursue the other side's responsibility afterward. Moreover, Yu Qianqiu relied on his low cultivation and outnumbered them. Daluo sect has nothing to say about this. If it weren't for Yu Qianqiu being alone in the cultivation world, Daluo sect wouldn't have broken their promise to retaliate. Ma Jiugu also said, "If Daluo sect really doesn't let this matter go, I will personally go to Daluo sect and reason with those old guys. I don't believe that Luo Qingtian can cover the sky with one hand in Daluo sect." After the conversation, Feng Xiangtian didn't agree because of his reputation, but Ma Jiugu promised him that she would think of a way to make Yu Qianqiu's return not tarnish the sect master's reputation, so Feng Xiangtian acquiesced. However, while supporting Immortal Island was searching for Yu Qianqiu seemed to have disappeared from the cultivation world. Some people even speculated that Daluo sect might have secretly found Yu Qianqiu and killed him. If Daluo sect did this openly, they would be suspected of breaking their promise. Although most people wouldn't say it, the truth was the truth. Because of Yu Qianqiu's disappearance, this matter was almost forgotten by everyone. However, just yesterday, news suddenly came from Hat Island that Yu Qianqiu had made an appearance and was personally brought to the Wu clan by the clan leader. This news quickly spread throughout the entire Supporting Immortal Island. As a result, Supporting Immortal Island's most senior consecrator, Ma Jiugu, the former sect master, Guan Dinghai, the Cultivation Pavilion's principal elder, O Sihai, the Alchemy Pavilion's principal elder, Guan Weiwu, the Myriad Fragrance Garden's principal elder, Ferdinand, and the others all went to find the sect master. At that time, Feng Xiangtian was telling Dongfang Cheng Ao some things. When such a group of people suddenly came to find them, the two of them were shocked. They didn't expect that Yu Qianqiu, who had left Supporting Immortal Island for many years, would have such a great influence on the island. Feng Xiangtian didn't say anything. This was something he had tacitly agreed to in the past. Moreover, after Yu Qianqiu returned to Supporting Immortal Island, even if he didn't contribute his own mysterious fire art, it would still become a product of Supporting Immortal Island. This was also a great merit for him as the sect master. As a result, he immediately ordered Dongfang Cheng Ao to carry out this matter. At the same time, Feng Xiangtian immediately thought that the Daluo sect might also make a move. He carefully warned Dongfang Cheng Ao and told him to act according to the circumstances. Before Dongfang Cheng Ao left, he asked the others, "If Yu Qianqiu doesn't want to return to Supporting Immortal Island, what should I do?" The others immediately fell silent. From the beginning to the end, it was Supporting Immortal Island's wishful thinking. They never considered Yu Qianqiu's thoughts. In their minds, Supporting Immortal Island was the #1 sect in the world. Who didn't want to attach themselves to it? How could they refuse it? However, Yu Qianqiu always did things his own way and often did things that were out of line. It wasn't like they hadn't seen it before. What if he didn't want to return? They couldn't just kidnap him. What was the point of that? After a moment of silence, Ma Jiugu suddenly smiled. She seemed to have thought of a solution. The others revealed inquiring expressions. Ma Jiugu smiled and said, "Back then, I could see that this boy was different from ordinary people, so I showed him some kindness. In return, he owed me a promise. I originally had another use for this promise, but now it seems that I might have to use it on him. Changao, try to persuade him to return. If he doesn't come back, ask him if he still remembers the promise he made to me. Tell him that I want him to come to Supporting Immortal Island and fulfill the promise he made to me in the past. Since there was such a thing, it would be easy to handle." Dongfang Cheng Ao received the order and rushed here overnight. However, what happened in front of him was beyond his expectation. He said those polite words to buy some time for Yu Qianqiu. As long as Yu Qianqiu agreed to return to Supporting Immortal Island, he would have a way to bring Yu Qianqiu back to Supporting Immortal Island. After all, the strength of the world's #1 sect wasn't just for show. Once Yu Qianqiu went to Supporting Immortal Island and confirmed his identity as a disciple of Supporting Immortal Island, Ma Jiugu, who had made a guarantee, would naturally come forward to deal with the following matters. Presumably, she would have a way to restrict Luo Qingtian. But who knew that when Luo Qingtian issued a challenge, Yu Qianqiu actually agreed to it without any hesitation? Dongfang Cheng Ao was suffering in silence. He had just said in the name of Supporting Immortal Island that he wouldn't intervene in their personal grievances. He couldn't slap Supporting Immortal Island's face in front of so many people, right? But if he didn't intervene, how was he going to explain to the people in his sect when he returned? Now that things had come to this, he could only choose an opportunity to act. Dongfang Cheng Ao stepped back speechlessly. Qiu Weiyuan smacked his lips and really didn't know what to say. In fact, he was also appointed by the 10,000 demons to deal with Yu Qianqiu, but his idea was quite different from that of Supporting Immortal Island. They were interested in Yu Qianqiu's mysterious fire art that could kill people of a higher level. As long as they recruited Yu Qianqiu into the 10,000 demons, there was no need to worry that they wouldn't be able to get something out of him. However, as Dongfang Chang Ao said, now was the time for internal strife when there were foreign enemies invading. What's more, in order to deal with the foreign enemies, the orthodox and devil sects of the entire cultivation world had put aside their prejudices and temporarily formed an alliance. Now, the cultivation alliance was not only made up of the orthodox sects, but also the devil sections. The current situation was that no matter how much hatred they had in the past, they had to let it all go now. Anything else could wait until the foreign enemies were defeated. At that time, no matter what they wanted to do, they wouldn't violate the taboo of the Chinese cultivation world. In secular terms, it was the national righteousness. This was something that no one could afford to offend, regardless of whether it was the orthodox or the devil. Luo Qingtian first provoked the four major families in the name of the Daluo sect. Under the current situation in the cultivation world, it was definitely related to violating the taboo of everyone. Qiu Wuyuan immediately stood on the side of the four major families without hesitation and took the opportunity to support Yu Qianqiu. Who knew that once Dongfang Chang Ao intervened, the little lunatic Yu Qianqiu actually gave up the protection of the four major families and wanted to fight one-on-one with Luo Qingtian? Did he really think that Luo Qingtian was as easy to scare as Zhu Xianxian? Wasn't he courting death? In this way, not to mention Dongfang Chang Ao, even Qiu Wuyuan couldn't intervene anymore. The masters of other sects all followed the rules, so there was no reason for him, Qiu Wuyuan, to intervene at this time. Chapter 360. Brother Yu, you have to think it through, Qiu Wuyuan said reluctantly, but he kept signaling the four family heads with his eyes. The four family heads, who were stunned, immediately came to their senses and said in unison, "No." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said indifferently, "It's nothing. The grudge between me and Daluo sect will come to an end sooner or later. Today is just the beginning. If the four family heads really agree with my identity, then don't stop me and step back." Ze. Hearing the call, Ze immediately understood Yu Qianqiu's intention. Her delicate body stood between him and the four family heads, her pretty face expressionless. "Yu Qianqiu, if something happens to you, how are we going to explain it to the elders? How are we going to?" Wu Sihai was a little anxious and almost said the great ancestor. Although he didn't say it out loud, the eyes of the people around him flickered. They were all secretly guessing just what kind of identity did Yu Qianqiu have for the four great clans to be willing to fall out with the Daluo sect just to protect him. Luo Qingtian was stunned for a while. He said those words out of anger. He didn't expect Yu Qianqiu to really agree. It was really surprising. At this moment, he came back to his senses and glanced at the four family heads coldly. He snorted and said, "Although the Chinese cultivation world is being eyed by foreign enemies, if you four family heads provoke Daluo sect first, then don't blame us for not following the rules." He waved to the surrounding crowd and said, "My friends from the cultivation world, please bear witness." The surrounding cultivators immediately responded in unison. Luo Qingtian's status in the cultivation world was quite high. It was difficult for ordinary cultivators to even see him. Now, they actually got to see him fight. Moreover, his opponent was the scum of the cultivation world, Yu Qianqiu. It was really a show to watch. As for Yu Qianqiu's twisted name, no one knew if he had done something shameless or if someone was jealous of his reputation. No one knew when it started to spread. In any case, even if it didn't fit the facts, everyone still called him that. The four great clan heads frowned deeply as they exchanged glances. They were still hesitant. Yu Qianqiu stared at Luo Qingtian and said faintly, "This is a personal matter between me and the Daluo sect. It has nothing to do with the four major families. Ze, please step aside." Ze stared at the four of them expressionlessly. Since it had come to this, the four of them had nothing to say. They shook their heads helplessly and moved to the side. Wu Sihai gave a few instructions to a Wu clan elder, and that elder quickly returned to the Wu clan. He was probably going back to report. The fight was about to begin. Those who were too close didn't want to be affected, but they also didn't want to miss the excitement, so they all squeezed to the back. After all, Luo Qingtian's cultivation was profound, and he might be provoked by the aftershock of the fight. Moreover, Yu Qianzhou's starflame fire technique wasn't easy to deal with. However, everyone didn't want to retreat too far away so that they couldn't see clearly, so many people simply flew to the roof to watch. The huge area was quickly emptied to the two of them. Only Dongfang Chang, Ao and a few others who were confident in their cultivation and weren't afraid of being affected didn't retreat too far. Yu Qianzhou and Luo Qingtian looked at each other, and a storm was brewing. After waiting for a while, Luo Qingtian's eyes actually showed a hint of appreciation to Yu Qianzhou. He couldn't see any panic or fear from Yu Qianzhou. Among the younger generation, there were very few people who dared to face him like this. Just this courage alone was not something ordinary people could compare with. He didn't know that ever since Yu Qianzhou followed by Changchun, his vision was no longer the same as before. After staying with people at Bai Changchun's level for a long time, he didn't even care about the Demon King and the Ghost King, who were equivalent to the final stage of the passing calamity stage. How could he take a middle stage of the passing calamity stage seriously, let alone be afraid of him? At this moment, Luo Qingtian suddenly said, "Yu Qianzhou, you really live up to your reputation. You are a courageous person, but I don't understand. Why do you repeatedly go against my Daluo sect and even kill my only son?" Sect leader Luo must have made a mistake. It's not that I, Yu Qianzhou, repeatedly go against your Daluo sect. It's that your Daluo sect has repeatedly bullied others because of your great power, Yu Qianzhou replied coldly. Luo Qingtian raised his white eyebrows and said rather conceitedly, "I am confident that I have strict restrictions on my disciples." How can you say that I am bullying others? Strict restrictions. What a joke. Yu Qianzhou sneered. When I first entered the cultivation world, my master, Ong Guangceng, happened to obtain a spiritual herb called the rainbow lingji mushroom. Unfortunately, he ran into someone from your Daluo sect. In the end, not only did your disciple snatch the spiritual herb, but he also didn't let his master go. Once my master died, I ended up wandering around. Is this what you mean by strict restrictions? Secondly, you did not teach your son well and allowed him to cause trouble. Your son, Luo Xiaohan, actually forced Yu Qianzhou's woman to drink with him in public. Do you think I should teach him a lesson? How can you say that I am going against your Daluo sect? In the 100 Flowers Valley, your son repeatedly provoked me and forced me to fight him. That's why I killed him. Do you want me to let him kill me? I'm not making things up. Many people have seen it with their own eyes. Why is it that you, sect leader Luo, say that I am going against your Daluo sect time and time again? If I ran into one incident, it could be said that it was a coincidence, but I ran into them one after another. Could it be that the Daluo sect is as strict as sect master Luo said? When it came to reasoning, Yu Qianzhou's mouth had never been afraid of anyone. As soon as he opened his mouth, he listed out the exalted sect's crimes in front of everyone in the cultivation world. It was as if he had been persecuted by the exalted sect. When Ziyi looked at Yu Qianzhou, her beautiful lips moved. She thought to herself, it turns out that master doesn't know everything. Maybe there are other secrets to the other incidents. Hearing this, Luo Qingtian's white eyebrows trembled slightly. He turned around to look at Yi Haiping and the other Daluo sect disciples with a sharp gaze. Those people's eyes were dodging his gaze in fear. It seemed that there were secrets in what Yu Qianzhou said that even Luo Qingtian, the sect leader, didn't know. It's meaningless to say more. I will avenge my son's death. Luo Qingtian turned around and said after a pause, in order to prevent people from saying that I'm a bully, I'll let you have 3 moves first. If you can withstand 100 moves from me and stay alive, I promise that the grudge between you and Daluo sect will be written off. Daluo sect and I will not cause any trouble for you in the future. Do you think that's fair? Dongfang Changgao and Qiu Weiyuan's eyebrows twitched. In their opinion, although it was almost impossible for Yu Qianqiu to last more than 100 moves against Luo Qingtian had more or less given Yu Qianqiu a way out. It was not certain that Yu Qianqiu would not stop until he was dead. It seemed like Yu Qianqiu's words were effective. The crowd began to discuss among themselves. Even if you don't cause trouble for me, I'll still cause trouble for Daluo sect sooner or later. Yu Qianqiu said indifferently, since it's to end the grudge, there's no such thing as fairness or unfairness. I, Yu Qianqiu, will not appreciate sect leader Luo's kindness. You make the first move. After 3 moves, I won't show mercy. Luo Qingtian's white eyebrows relaxed and he said loudly, let me experience Yu Qianqiu's starflame fire technique. I won't let you down. Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly. He turned around and walked toward the bridge. As he walked, he said, it's better for us to end our grudge on this 100-meter-long river, lest the shops nearby suffer. The river was 100 meters wide, and the bridge was also 100 meters long. The water flowed slowly under the bridge. Just as Yu Qianqiu walked to the center of the arch bridge, he suddenly heard the sound of wind breaking. He quickly turned around and saw Luo Qingtian shooting over like a phantom. In an instant, he stood 2 to 3 meters away. Yu Qianqiu was slightly surprised. What a fast speed! It was almost as fast as teleportation. His sharp eyes under his white eyebrows were overflowing with battle intent. Luo Qingtian said in a deep voice, let's do it. The surrounding gazes immediately focused on the bridge. Many people saw the 2 of them on the bridge, so they crowded to the bridgehead to watch. Yu Qianqiu didn't hold back. He swung his sleeves toward the sky, and hundreds of green flying swords shot out from his sleeves. They circled around him. Luo Qingtian's eyes flashed. What a strange flying sword. What a beautiful sword technique. Before he finished speaking, dozens of flying swords turned into green lights and shot over at lightning speed. Luo Qingtian shouted, 1 move. He turned into a shadow and flew up from the bridge, barely avoiding the flying sword that was shot at him. Yu Qianqiu made a hand seal, and the flying swords quickly turned back. They merged with all the other flying swords and shot into the sky, chasing after Luo Qingtian. A shout came from the sky. 2 moves. Luo Qingtian, who was soaring up, suddenly changed his direction and shot out horizontally. A group of green shadows brushed past him. The onlookers exclaimed. While flying at such a high speed, he didn't stop and suddenly changed his direction. Moreover, he didn't slow down at all. He really deserved to be the famous Daluo sect leader. His cultivation was indeed extraordinary. Even Qiu Weiyuan couldn't help but praise, Luo Qingtian, you're really good. Damn it. Even the flying swords couldn't catch up with him. This old guy's speed was too abnormal. Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes. They were both in the middle stage of tribulation passing, but the difference between Healy and Luo Qingtian wasn't just a little bit. At least Healy didn't have this ability. He made a hand seal, and the hundreds of flying swords in the sky turned into pillars. Like flying dragons in the sky, they chased after Luo Qingtian. 3 moves. Luo Qingtian shouted in the sky, and his body suddenly fell down. He dodged the flying swords as fast as a meteor and shot towards Yu Qianqiu in the middle of the bridge. 3 moves were over, and it was time for Luo Qingtian to make his move. The onlookers below immediately worried for Yu Qianqiu. As the figure whistled over, Yu Qianqiu opened his arms. Green flames suddenly burst out and instantly spread to both ends of the bridge. The sudden high temperature almost instantly turned the 100-meter-long bridge into ashes. The two onlookers who were closer to the bridge were shocked on the spot, and they quickly escaped from the bridgehead. The horrifying high temperature was simply terrifying. Two green flames flashed in Yu Qianqiu's eyes. He raised his head and slapped his palm towards Luo Qingtian. A thick green fire dragon welcomed the oncoming person. Luo Qingtian, who was attacking downwards, was also shocked. He had never seen green flames before. Before he arrived, he could already feel the soul-stirring high temperature. A white protective upstanding chi burst out from his body in an instant, enveloping his whole body as he dove straight into the green flames that were coming at him. The onlookers below were dumbfounded as they waited for the result. Who knew that Luo Qingtian, who had just rushed into the green flames, would turn around and fly back in the blink of an eye? He flew directly into the sky. Zi, who was below, suddenly smiled sweetly. She thought to herself, this person definitely doesn't know how powerful Yu Qianqiu's green flames are. I'm sure he'll suffer a loss. Even I, who has the cultivation of the late stage of tribulation passing, can't bear it. How can a mere middle stage of tribulation passing be able to bear it? Chapter 361. As soon as Luo Qingtian flew into the air, he immediately felt that something was wrong. When he heard a group of sharp whistles above his head, he immediately thought of the group of flying swords in the air and looked up. The green flying swords originally stopped in the air. At this time, the green shadows poured down and finally seized the opportunity to vent their shame. They shot toward Luo Qingtian, who was in the protective aura like a storm. Such a thrilling attack scene made a lot of people below worry for Luo Qingtian. With the protective aura on his body, he definitely couldn't escape as fast as before. Bang! Luo Qingtian's shout suddenly sounded in the air, followed by a loud bang in the air, like a thunderbolt. The white stellar energy on his body suddenly exploded, and the hundreds of green flying swords that were hurtling towards him were instantly blown into pieces and scattered everywhere. Ah! Self-destructing the protective aura. The people watching the battle below were in a commotion. Everyone couldn't understand. Could it be that Luo Qingtian's protective aura couldn't block the attack of Yu Qianqiu's flying swords? He had to use a method that consumed a lot of qi, self-destructing the protective aura. They didn't know that Luo Qingtian arrogantly thought that his protective aura could withstand Yu Qianqiu's green fire. Who knew that when he rushed into the sea of fire, he found that it was not what he thought. The temperature of the green fire was so high that it almost broke his protective aura on the spot. He was immediately shocked. With such a terrifying flame, he was afraid that once his protective aura was broken, his body would definitely suffer a disaster. Fortunately, his reaction was very fast. When he felt that something was wrong, he immediately flew back. But even so, the high temperature attached to the protective aura was difficult to disperse. With such a high temperature protective aura, he didn't dare to withdraw it back into his body at this time. He could only wait for it to slowly cool down, but it was so hot that he trembled slightly. Fortunately, the people below couldn't see it while he was flying. At this time, Yu Qianqiu's flying swords attacked. Luo Qingtian, who was suffering in the steamer, simply clenched his teeth and self-destructed the protective aura. He took the opportunity to resist the flying swords to relieve his pain. But the protective aura was formed by condensing a lot of qi. This explosion really lost a lot of qi. Damn it! He blew it up first. Yu Qianqiu was a little gloomy. Initially, he wanted to wait for the green flame flying swords to come a little closer, then he would immediately explode these 100 flying swords into a sea of green flames that filled the sky. At that time, no matter how high this old fellow's cultivation was, even if he couldn't kill Yu Qianqiu, he would still be able to burn Yu Qianqiu into a mess. Then, Yu Qianqiu would have the upper hand. That was because the Deluo sect master was truly extraordinary. Even the flying sword could not catch up to him, so how were they supposed to fight? He could only resort to trickery. Unexpectedly, Boss Yu, also miscalculated. Luo Qingtian actually detonated his protective upstanding chi one step ahead of him and blew up all the flying swords. His plan was immediately ruined. In fact, Yu Qianqiu didn't know that the reason why Luo Qingtian did that was because of his green fire. The opportunity was fleeting. Without the burden of the aura shield, the flying sword would definitely not be able to catch up with Luo Qingtian. The scattered azure flying swords quickly returned from the sky and circled around Yu Qianqiu again. Luo Qingtian also stood in the air and did not move for the time being. He stared at the scene below with a gloomy expression, and his mind was still thinking about the ferocity of the green fire. He didn't expect that after he let Yi Futian make 3 moves, he would suffer a loss and lose face. The bridge was destroyed, and Yu Qianqiu immediately landed on the water surface. He stood on the waves, not sinking or moving. He squinted his eyes and looked up at the sky. A raging green flame wrapped around his body, rendering the river surface rippling. He floated on the water surface and faced the Deluo sect master, Luo Qingtian, who was famous all over the world. The green fire man on the water surface was like a bright green pearl, shining brightly. The sudden occurrence of such a strange event confused most of the people present. However, Dongfang Chang, Ao and Qiu Weiyuan looked at each other at the same time, and there was a hint of shock in their eyes. The two of them could see that Luo Qingtian and Yu Qianqiu had only exchanged 1 or 2 moves, and the former seemed to have suffered a loss. How was this possible? The 4 family masters were also at the tribulation stage, so they naturally saw the clues. They looked at each other and sighed in their hearts. The direct disciple of the ancestor was indeed extraordinary. No wonder he had the confidence to challenge the Deluo sect master alone. This is the starflame fire technique. Luo Qingtian's voice came from the sky. Yes. Yu Qianqiu replied firmly and proudly. Do you dare to come up and fight? Luo Qingtian's voice came again. Yu Qianqiu, who was in the blue fire, shook his head and said loudly, Sect Master Luo, you think too highly of me, Yu Qianqiu. Whether it is cultivation or speed, I am far inferior to you. If I come up to the sky, I will only be beaten. It is better for me to stay on the ground and deal with the changes. Luo Qingtian was silent for a while, then he nodded and said, again. Then, he swooped down and shouted, Deluo mountain splitting palm. A gust of wind blew in the sky. As Luo Qingtian swooped down and struck with his palm, a huge shadow of a palm with a radius of tens of meters appeared in the sky and covered the river. Before the shadow of the palm arrived, Yu Qianqiu immediately felt a strong pressure. The entire river was slightly dented. Even if he released the blue fire to resist, it would be forced away by such a strong pressure. It couldn't hurt Luo Qingtian at all. He squinted his eyes, and the flying sword that was circling around his body rushed into the blue fire. Along with the blue fire, it quickly disappeared without a trace. The river under his feet suddenly split open. Yu Qianqiu suddenly dove into the water and disappeared instantly. The pressure and momentum descended at the same time. The huge shadow of the palm then hit the water where Yu Qianqiu was standing just now. With a loud bang, a huge wave exploded in the river, accompanied by a strong airflow that spread in all directions. Many people who were watching the battle at the side quickly escaped, but there were also many people whose cultivation was too low. They couldn't escape in time and were suddenly washed away by the sudden flood. This was the price of watching a show. Many shops near the river were immediately destroyed. When the water passed, there were fish jumping everywhere on the ground. Of course, cultivators like Dongfang Zhangao immediately released their protective upstanding qi, which acted like a pillar in the middle of a raging river, withstanding the sudden attack of the flood. Luo Qingtian stopped at a low altitude. His sharp eyes under his white eyebrows were like torches, and he quickly looked down. The power of his palm instantly made a section of the river dozens of meters deep to see the bottom, and then the water violently converged and flowed again. This moment was enough for him to see the situation below clearly, but there was no Yu Qianqiu under the water. No one knew where he was hiding. After waiting for a while, Yu Qianqiu still didn't come out. Several people who stayed on the shore suddenly showed some suspicious expressions. Yu Qianqiu chose to fight in the river. Could it be that he was good at swimming and had already prepared to escape? Only Ziyi looked at the river calmly. She didn't believe that Elder Bai's disciple would be so useless that he would run away in fear before suffering a loss. Luo Qingtian, who was low in the air, seemed to be impatient. He suddenly descended and stepped on the water. He released his divine sense and went deep into the river to check around. His action of descending to the river was probably to lure Yu Qianqiu out. In fact, when Yu Qianqiu saw the incoming palm, he knew that he couldn't resist it with his cultivation, so he simply dived into the river and used the water spell to quickly escape far away to avoid the disaster. This was why he chose to fight on the river. With this big river as his backing, he, who had cultivated the water arts, could quickly escape in the water at any time. This was a method he had comprehended in the 1,000-mile lake. Who could be faster than him in the water? It was truly one of the best methods for escaping for his life. But escaping was escaping, not escaping. After the power of the palm, he quickly escaped back. Luo Qingtian's divine sense went back and forth on him a few times, but he couldn't find him. It could be seen that the mystery of the water spell had already made him one with the river water. It would be difficult for Luo Qingtian to find him with his current cultivation. The people on the river continued to look for him. Yu Qianqiu, who was under the river, was frowning and thinking. It was too dangerous to go out and fight, and it was too dangerous to escape. If he was beaten as soon as he showed up, how could he survive in the cultivation world in the future? Suddenly, he frowned and his eyes lit up. He remembered what Healy said. Healy said that the black fire could burn people's mind and destroy their divine sense. Why not give it a try? Luo Qingtian's divine sense swept back and forth at the bottom of the river. He didn't even let go of the corners of the river, fearing that Yu Qianqiu was hiding somewhere. Yu Qianqiu quietly stretched out 2 fingers, and a black light the size of an egg appeared on his fingertips. He pointed at the divine sense that was sweeping over. On the shore, the scattered people gradually approached again. Most of them suspected that Yu Qianqiu had escaped. After a long time, even Ziyi started to lose confidence. However, at that moment, Luo Qingtian, who was standing on the surface of the water, suddenly raised his head and let out a painful groan. He staggered on the surface of the water and lost control of himself. Half of his body sank into the water. Seeing that the black fire could really hurt people's divine sense, Yu Qianqiu, who was under the water, was overjoyed. He took advantage of the moment when Luo Qingtian was absent-minded and once again seized the opportunity to attack without hesitation. Suddenly, there was a shocking change on the surface of the river. The water's surface set off a wave of air, and the river water quickly spiraled up, completely engulfing Luo Qingtian. A water dragon that was dozens of meters wide and nearly 100 meters long instantly formed on the surface of the river. Just as everyone was shocked, the huge water dragon suddenly refracted the dazzling sunlight and looked crystal clear. It stood in the river and instantly stopped moving. "Ah! It's frozen!" many people exclaimed. After everyone reacted, they found that the water dragon really froze into ice in an instant, and it was showing a dense chill under the sun. "Ah! The river is also frozen!" Exclamation sounded again. Everyone looked together and saw that the river, which was 100 meters wide and 200 to 300 meters long, was full of white frost, and the chill was against the ice dragon. "Ah! Look, Yu Qianqiu is up there!" One person screamed and pointed. Everyone looked over and saw Yu Qianqiu standing proudly on the top of the 100 meters high ice dragon with his hands behind his back. The sunlight refracted from the top of the dragon, and he looked quite imposing. Dongfang Chang, Ao and Qiu Weiyuan were shocked. It was incredible that someone could instantly cast a spell to form such a large piece of ice. The masters of the 4 major families, as well as the 6 elders floating in the air across the river, all looked at Yu Qianqiu and secretly thought that he was indeed the disciple of the great ancestor. Ziyi's eyes lit up. Senior Bai's disciple did not let her down. Those who knew who Yu Qianqiu's master thought that such a mysterious spell must have been taught by Bai Changchun, but they didn't know that it was created by Yu Qianqiu. Of course, Bai Changchun's guidance was also indispensable. Sect leader. A group of Daluo sect disciples cried out in sorrow and rushed under the ice throne. At this moment, Luo Qingtian's voice suddenly spread from under the ice throne, and he shouted, "Get out of my way. This is a personal grudge between me and Yu Qianqiu. How can a mere ice trap me?" Chapter 362. Several figures stopped upon hearing the voice and stayed on the ice surface. Luo Qingtian's voice came from the ice again, "Step back." The Daluo sect disciples didn't dare to hesitate anymore and quickly returned to the shore. Yu Qianqiu looked at the ice throne below from the top of the ice dragon. He knew that it was difficult to trap an expert with such cultivation, but he could step on the Daluo sect leader today. Even if he lost later, it would be a glorious defeat. The eyes of the spectators on both sides of the river were also focused on the place where Luo Qingtian was trapped. "Ah!" A dull sound came from below the ice dragon, followed by a creaking sound. Cracks began to appear on the ice throne below, destroying the beauty of the entire ice dragon. The cracks began to spread to the body of the ice dragon. Bang! There was a loud noise, and the entire ice surface and both sides of the river trembled. The base of the ice dragon exploded instantly, and a figure shot out from below. The power of this explosion was extremely great. In order to escape, Luo Qingtian resisted the heavy pressure and used all his cultivation to make the explosion. The power could be imagined. Huge ice pieces shot out in all directions, and the onlookers on both sides of the river suddenly scattered. Those with low cultivation were already scared to the point that their faces turned pale. Under such power, not to mention the people, even the houses on both sides would be destroyed in an instant. At this moment, Dongfang Chang, Ao and Qiu Weiyuan tacitly flashed and stood by the riverside. At the same time, they pushed out their palms with great cultivation. A strong airflow rolled out and instantly pushed countless huge ice pieces to the river surface, saving many people and shops here. After this action, the two of them looked at each other. It was not that they really had a tacit understanding, but on this Hat Island, there were 2 shops and disciples at the same time, so they naturally had to protect them. On the other side of the river, the Wu family would take action. The surface of the frozen river was full of holes because of the exploding ice cubes. Under the ice throne, there was an ice pit at the place where Luo Qingtian escaped. After the huge ice dragon lost its base, it was about to collapse. Who knew that the bottom of the ice dragon just happened to correspond to the ice pit and was stuck there? Surprisingly, it was still standing on the ice river. However, the ice dragon was already shorter, and its body was covered in cracks. It could collapse at any time. Luo Qingtian stood on the ice surface dozens of meters away and looked up. His white eyebrows trembled as he laughed wildly. "What a great Yu Qianqiu! You really live up to your reputation. How many years has it been since I took over the exalted immortal sect? This is the first time someone has forced me into such a sorry state. This old man has finally seen the world today. My son dying in your hands is not an injustice. Ha! It had been a long time since he had a free fight. Who would have thought that he would be able to have a good fight with a junior today? Yu Qianqiu, do you still dare to fight? The voice spread out in all directions. There's something wrong with this old thing's brain. He's speaking incoherently. You're the one at a disadvantage. I should be the one asking this question. Yu Qianqiu stood on the shorter ice dragon and spat out 2 words in a sonorous voice, I'll accompany you. As the saying goes, the livelier a place is, the more attractive it is. Once you look, there will be something interesting to watch, and the people who have dispersed will return to the shore without fear of death. Sword, come. Luo Qingtian stretched out his hand towards the shore and shouted. The guard who was carrying his sword on the shore immediately held the sword with both hands. Luo Qingtian formed a claw with his hand, and with a clang, the sword was unsheathed and quickly shot into his hand. Qiu Weiyuan glanced at Dongfang Chang Ao beside him and said, the sword of the exalted immortal sect masters is a high-grade offensive dharma treasure. If Luo Qingtian pulls out the sword, I'm afraid Yu Qianqiu will be in danger. Dongfang Chang Ao looked straight ahead and said, You and Yu Qianqiu call each other brothers. If you help, I promise I won't say anything. Although one of them was a righteous and the other a demonic, they often met on different occasions and did not get along well with each other. Qiu Weiyuan rolled his eyes and stopped talking. He was too lazy to find trouble for himself. Luo Qingtian's sharp eyes under his white eyebrows glanced at the clear sword body with pity. Instantly, he became full of battle intent and laughed loudly. I thought it was enough to deal with a junior empty-handed. I didn't expect you, Yu Qianqiu, to have cultivated such a mysterious spell that you can actually force me to pull out this sword. The ice dragon under Yu Qianqiu's feet was not evenly distributed, and there were more and more cracks. It could fall at any time, but Luo Qingtian always had endless things to say. Yu Qianqiu said angrily, Old man, you talk too much nonsense. Are you going to fight or not? If not, I'm going back to sleep. Ah. Luo Qingtian was speechless and stunned. This was the first time someone dared to talk to him, the exalted immortal sect master, like this. Despite Luo Qingtian's noble status, many people in the crowd couldn't help but laugh out loud. Dongfang Chang Ao and Qiu Weiyuan looked at each other with a strange expression. The 4 family heads of the 4 major families were full of admiration. On Ziyi's pretty face, there was already a sweet smile. She was looking at the man on top of the ice dragon with admiration. Luo Qingtian was immediately angered by this sentence. He shouted, Ignorant junior, how dare you! The long sword in his hand slashed out a sword energy. As the sword edge slashed out, it formed a crescent silver-white cold light and shot out quickly. Bang! Ice shards splashed everywhere. The sword energy directly cut the ice dragon in half, and the upper half fell down. Yu Qianqiu waved his sleeves and threw out a green flying sword. He flipped over and jumped up from the ice dragon, landing on the flying sword. As soon as his feet landed, there was a whistling sound, and a sharp sword energy rushed towards him. At the same time, the ice dragon that was cut in half finally collapsed. Yu Qianqiu rode his sword and dodged quickly. The sword energy brushed past him, stirring up a strong wind and flew into the sky. Luo Qingtian's face was gloomy. The sword in his hand slashed dozens of times, and the sword energy immediately formed a sword net that covered the sky. The people who were worried about Yu Qianqiu changed their expressions. Ziyi had a piece of purple-black bamboo in her hand. She was ready to teleport to help at any time. Yu Qianqiu squinted his eyes. The distance was too close, and it was too difficult to get through the gaps in the sword net. Moreover, the sword net was too wide. With his speed, it would be equally difficult to escape. He thought for a moment, then turned around and rode his sword straight into the sky. The sword energy that formed a net chased after him. In the blink of an eye, after a few hundred meters, Yu Qianqiu flew backward and successfully passed through the expanding sword energy net. How could he always be suppressed by others and not fight back? If he didn't make a name for himself today, then when would he fight? Yu Qianqiu's eyes were cold. He shouted, "Hi," and opened his arms, as if he was summoning something between heaven and earth. The group of people below was glad that he was out of danger. When they saw him doing this again, they were wondering what he was going to do. Suddenly, their expressions changed. In an instant, the sky darkened. The water rippled in the sky, and the range was a few hundred meters. It was right above Yu Qianqiu's head. Yu Qianqiu opened his arms and stared down fiercely. Ah! This! What is going on? There was a cry of surprise from below. A lake actually appeared in the sky out of nowhere. Dongfang Chang, Ao and Qiu Weiyuan looked at each other and said in surprise, "Water spell." Ziyi's eyes sparkled. She felt that it was a worthwhile trip to see such a mysterious spell. The people from the 4 major families all opened their mouths and looked at the sky in disbelief. "Hi!" Yu Qianqiu shouted again. He raised his arms in the air and turned. A large area of water in the air gradually rotated. It rotated faster and faster, like a tornado in the air. The momentum was really amazing. Now, he finally understood what his master had said. He could control the source of heaven and earth, so it was indeed easier for him to use some techniques. Otherwise, with his own cultivation, he would not be able to withstand such a large pool of water in the air, let alone control it. Luo Qingtian looked at the sky, and his pupils shrank. He also didn't understand what Yu Qianqiu was going to do. He couldn't drown himself with a pool of water, right? Go! Yu Qianqiu pointed his finger at Luo Qingtian below. The water whirlwind above his head immediately shot out water arrows. When they passed by Yu Qianqiu, they immediately turned into ice thorns with cold light, whistling down. "Oh my God! What kind of spell is this?" Someone below exclaimed. Dozens of ice thorns flew over rapidly. Luo Qingtian did not care about these things. He was afraid that Yu Qianqiu had made such a big commotion, so he should not only have these tricks up his sleeves. He dodged it immediately. Tut, tut, tut. Dozens of ice thorns pierced deep into the ice, and some of them were smashed into pieces. However, what followed was not just dozens of ice thorns, but hundreds of them. Luo Qingtian shouted, "Is this all you've got?" He didn't dodge anymore. The long sword in his hand stirred up sharp sword qi in the air. In an instant, ice chips flew everywhere, and they were reflected by the sunlight into a colorful and dazzling scene. Yu Qianqiu seemed to be addicted to it. The ice thorns flew wildly, as if he wouldn't be satisfied until he squandered the pool of water above his head. Indeed, no matter how much water there was, it couldn't be squandered like this. Everyone didn't understand why he was doing such a useless thing. He really couldn't do anything to Luo Qingtian. Looking around, the sky above the river was shrouded by the enchanting colors of the ice dust and sunlight, and the sound of the sword qi breaking the ice was endless. The water in the sky was exhausted, and with the last wave of ice thorns, hundreds of green flying swords suddenly appeared around Yu Qianqiu, protecting him as he rotated like a cone. He carried the flying swords and followed the last wave of ice thorns, shooting towards Luo Qingtian below. Everyone immediately realized that the previous big movement was just a cover-up. It seemed that the final killer move was still on this weird flying sword. The Daluo sect disciples were afraid that the sect leader would be blinded by the ice dust and suffer losses. One of them exclaimed, "Be careful, sect leader, it's a trap." As soon as he said that, Dongfang Chang, Ao and Chiu Weiyuan glared at that person, and that person immediately shut up. Luo Qingtian was alert when he heard that. He vaguely saw a green shadow shooting towards him from the sky, and immediately thought of the terrifying green fire. He kept his long sword and quickly dodged. "But it seemed a little late. I didn't manage to blow you up last time, so I have to let you have a taste of it this time." Yu Qianqiu smiled sinisterly and rushed into the ice dust with the flying sword. Bang, bang, bang. The green fire flying sword immediately exploded into a sea of green fire. The green fire spread, and the ice dust on the river immediately dissipated. Luo Qingtian's speed was really fast. In the blink of an eye, he rushed out of the sea of green fire and flashed into the air. However, his appearance had changed drastically. It was not an exaggeration to say that he was in rags. His coat was burnt, his shoes and trousers were gone, and the few rags on his body were also burnt black. His hair was burnt short, especially that pair of beautiful white eyebrows. It was such a pity. Fortunately, Yu Qianqiu did not intend to harm the innocent. There were still many people on both sides of the river watching against the high temperature. However, Luo Qingtian's appearance in the air almost made everyone's jaws drop. Was this still the Daluo sect leader with an extraordinary aura? "Yu Qianqiu, how dare you trick me?" Luo Qingtian shouted furiously in the air. F***ck. You still managed to escape like this. Yu Qianqiu looked at the sky in shock. Fortunately, he still had a backup plan, so there was still a way out. The sea of fire quickly converged into his body. Without saying anything, he turned around and dove into the melted river. This was his backup plan to save his life. He did not understand why Luo Qingtian could escape from the sea of fire unscathed. It was because he did not hear it when he dove down. If Luo Qingtian was not reminded by his disciples, he would have suffered a great loss. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.